This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr. Is Michael in today?
I think
he's in today. Thank you. Lisa Mateo. I hadn't had a Barr sighting yet. Yep. And Lisa Mateo as well. We welcome all of you on a Tuesday. We're political free today. Just kidding.
Just kidding.
David Gurr will be with us. There's lots to talk about across this
Wendy Schiller.
nation. Professor Schiller from Brown University on this historic moment. We'll get to all that as well. We're going to stop the show right now. Sweeney's having a tantrum when Comcast reports. Oh, he's got to go right to it. I mean, you know, we talk about Warner Brothers Discovery, and we'll talk the NBA rights today. We've got a specialist on that, but I mean, Comcast, they're different than the other streaming wars battles, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Comcast has got the huge cable TV business, which is just a melting ice cube because of cord cutting. But they've got the broadband. What's the most basic commodity in your household? Broadband connection.
Negative 120,000.
Right, exactly. So you got to be there. But then they've also got the NBC Universal business, and then they've got the parks business, which has been like Universal. It is for Disney. Universal Parks.
Yeah, they lightened my wallet a couple years
ago. Exactly,
they
did.
So there's your Comcast report for the day. Let's get right to it. We got a great set of guests, an important market guest coming up. Shout out right now. Ed Yardeni yesterday for 2 blocks on his roaring 20s. Was that too much optimism for you?
Yeah, exactly. We could take a little bit of optimism. I mean, again, we've got futures here kind of mixed here, Tom. But again, this is a market that just seems to move higher here.
It does. The drawdown on the NASDAQ 100 futures is 4.5%. Right. We're deep. We're back. We're distant to the distant past of June 17th.
Yeah. So we'll see. But we got, again, futures kind of mixed here this morning.
From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Good morning. Yeah, futures mixed right now. We have NASDAQ futures, little change down about 7 points. Dow futures, little change up 38 points. We have S&P futures up about 4 points. And this is that focus shift from U.S. politics. A heavy week for company earnings. Tesla, Alphabet report after the close. Analysts are looking for some details on Tesla's robo-taxi service and also whether AI offerings will boost Alphabet's Google Cloud revenue. Meanwhile, earnings coming in fast and furious this morning. We'll start with UPS, down more than 7%. The company missed profit estimates. That was due to higher labor costs, also weaker package demand. Then you have General Motors. Profits surged 60% from a year ago, so it easily beat expectations. And thanks to that was a strong demand for its gas-powered trucks. Those shares up 4%. You have General Electric up 2%, reported that jump in second quarter profit, raised its guidance for the year. Its newly independent GE Aerospace took advantage of strong demand during that busy summer travel season. Stay tuned here at 8:30 Wall Street time. We'll have the GE CEO Larry Culp on live. A lot more coming in from Comcast, Coca-Cola, Spotify. We'll get to that in the next hit. To the bond market, the 2-year yield 4.51%, down 1 basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.23%, down 2 basis points. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
You know, I identify as a Coca-Cola person, but if you put Pepsi in front of me, I'm just as happy.
Can you tell the difference?
No, yes, I can, but I don't really care. They're both good. Now, Lisa, she can't participate.
She hasn't had one in 10 years.
No, but again, I identify as Coca-Cola, but you put a Pepsi, I'll drink it happily.
I don't know. I don't drink the stuff. So,
okay.
I drink it so rarely that when I have one, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a kid.
Yep.
Again, we're going to carry on a conversation here as we had with Ed Yardeni and other worthies yesterday. Robert Teeter joins right now, Silvercrest Asset Management. It's Robert Teeter. Yeah, and it's a trenchant note. I mean, it's a really, really important note because I look at Larry Culp, Lawrence Culp, Danaher at GE. I don't know why they don't name change it to GE Aerospace. And it's all wonderful numbers. And then I look at the Bloomberg and the forward multiple is 40. That's un-American. I got GE with a 40 multiple. How does that happen?
Well, that's one of the really interesting disconnects going on right now, in my view. Most of the fundamentals look pretty good across the board. Earnings seem okay. Economy seems okay. We can dig into that a bit more, but the valuation piece is what gives me a little bit of pause here. So forward PE on the S&P of about 20 as we enter earnings season sort of sets the stage for if anybody has a significant miss in any of the important areas, we're at a little bit of a risk here for a correction.
Walmart, forward PE. 29.
Exactly.
I don't get it.
No, I mean, and you think about those valuations, those numbers when interest rates were near zero, I guess you could kind of discount them. But now we've got a 10-year Treasury, north of 4.25% here. That makes those valuations even that much more tenuous.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the path for rates going forward is certainly lower, but I think the pace is what's up for debate. And there's also the question of when those rate cuts come, will it be for a good reason or a bad reason? For now, it seems like on track for cutting for a good reason, but it'll likely be a long cycle. I mean, right now, likely 3 cuts maybe by January. That probably doesn't bring the 10-year down a whole lot more. So it's going to be a while until we get rates down to a level that are consistent with these PE multiples.
Paul, staying with Larry Culp, Danaher, where he made his acclaim. He's he's a legend for 40 years. Thrilled to have him on here. And the 8 o'clock hour, free cash flow pre-pandemic like a 5-ish, 6-ish. Now they're out to $7 billion. So they got growth.
Yep.
But they're popping that with a 33 multiple. I just don't. This is not a Graham Dodd and Cottle.
And this is not a high tech name per se.
Exactly.
So what is the risk here, Robert? I mean, I'm kind of concerned that if I have one of these NVIDIAs or Microsofts or any of these Magnificent Seven come in with a revenue outlook that's just not quite up to snuff, this market potentially could be at risk. Not just the individual name, but it seems like the market's kind of on the backs of these Magnificent Seven. What's the risk there, do you think?
I think that's a pretty significant risk factor, and I would add that a significant miss on the consumer side sets up a similar risk, because that would put us into the mode of those Fed cuts being in the negative category rather than positive. So we are in a slow growth mode. I do think that's one of the reasons why a lot of these companies are sporting very high multiples. Tough to find growth in a slow growth world. You gravitate to where the growth is. But I agree, any miss out of the Mag 7 or out of the consumer side, I think sets us up for some potential volatility.
So
here.
this is off your remit, but if you have a portfolio view like a retirement plan, what are you saying? Get out of growth and go with growthiness value, or go with, value where you're stuck in it for 10 years if it doesn't pop? What do you do on a portfolio structure basis?
So we've been encouraging a lot of balance between growth and value on the basis that some of the cyclical side of the economy is likely to do okay with a lot of this re-onshoring and manufacturing build in the U.S., particularly domestic. But you need growth, and you need growth in your portfolio. So we've been of a mind of not vacillating too much between those two and taking a pretty balanced point of view. We've also been big advocates of the good old-fashioned concept of rebalancing. So we've not been ones to shy away from these high valuations and say you need to move to cash. The earnings are coming through, and that's what we're hanging our hat on, but careful to not let allocations get too far out of control. So rebalancing an important part of this market.
We had a little bit, I guess, over the last couple of weeks. We saw the Russell 2000 outperforming the S&P. I mean, a little bit of a rotation, if you will. What did you make of that? Because, I mean, again, some of the market experts are telling us we haven't seen that kind of outperformance of the small caps versus the S&P 500 like forever.
Right.
So what did you make of that?
That was a pretty epic outlier-sized move. I had been hopeful for a while that there would be a catalyst to a move to broadening out markets. I think we need to be a little bit careful. That may also have in its own way been a rebalancing. It came very fast, very furious.
Yeah.
It looked a bit more like a one-time move. There's a lot of optimism building around earnings outside the Mag 7 and earnings in small cap. I think those earnings will come through, but we have to sort of temper the enthusiasm a little bit. Some of the expectations are for pretty high numbers to come through. So that's another area that needs to unfold in the right path.
Mike from Bedford emails in. He says, ask Teeter about Park Avenue. To me, there's an effervescence right now in Manhattan, and something about Fortress Diamond is going up on Park Avenue.
Oh, I can't wait to
And Citadel's
get to that
got their brand spanking new 425 Park. There's a restaurant down below I've tested.
Okay.
It's like a McDonald's. And, they're going to build a skyscraper. What's your take on the reestablishment of investment finance Manhattan?
I agree with that assessment. I think Manhattan's been fairly effervescent for the year. starting back in about April. It's gotten really busy here, in my view. I live in the city, work in the city. It's busy. It's busy in a good way. And what's interesting is that there is still that disconnect, though, across the whole economy. So Midtown Manhattan is definitely popping, definitely very busy. And yet you hear some comments from, airlines and hotels and others that, lower end consumer pulling back a little bit. Doesn't hurt the top line on economic growth overall, but a little bit of a reason for concern.
I
But
looked
the
at
city's
the price
doing
of
well.
a decent hotel in Midtown. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like New Orleans and Mardi Gras season.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a ton of money.
Yes.
They need more rooms here. We've been saying that for decades.
Your travel guide with Robert Teeter. Thank you so much. Robert Teeter is a Silvercrest Asset Management. Futures up 4. With the news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Vice President Kamala Harris has raised more than $100 million since Sunday and has secured the support of enough Democratic delegates to become her party's nominee against Donald Trump. Harris sealed her status as the presumptive nominee Monday night after crossing the magic number of 1,976 pledged delegates, according to an unofficial Associated Press tally. More on the Harris campaign with Bloomberg's Ed Baxter.
Kamala Harris, in a meeting with campaign workers, came out swinging against Donald Trump.
Predators who abused women. Fraudsters who ripped off consumers. Cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
She says in her former jobs as a prosecutor and attorney general, she took on perpetrators of all kinds. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump's running mate slammed the Biden White House. J.D. Vance spoke at a rally in Radford, Virginia.
Now, history will remember Joe Biden as not just a quitter, which he is, but one of the worst presidents in the United States of America. But my friends, Kamala Harris is a million times worse, and everybody knows it.
Vance called the Democrats a threat to democracy. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said conditions for a ceasefire and hostage deal with Hamas are becoming ripe, suggesting the two sides are getting closer to agreeing to at least a temporary halt to their war in Gaza. Netanyahu spoke while in Washington on his first foreign trip since the conflict began almost 9 months ago. Global news, 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Happiest person in America. Maya Rudolph. Are you kidding me? On Saturday Night
yes.
Live. I can't
Full
believe
Employment
it.
Act.
They're all out in the Hamptons. They're not working until like September 15th or
Yep.
whatever. They ought to drag them all in. Whatever your political persuasion. I mean, it's just scary. She has 3 Emmys from 3 separate different projects.
Okay.
That's how gifted she is.
Absolutely.
Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. She doesn't say anything. She walks on, and you just start laughing.
Exactly. So, that'd be great on SNL.
Thanks to CBS News, they say calls from Maya Rudolph to reprise Harris interpretation on SNL. We'll see on that as well. Paul, let's get out front on this. The NBA, now there's 3 bidders for it.
Yeah, actually, pretty much everybody's into the NBA these days. But the big thing was it was Warner Brothers Discovery that their TNT network has been doing NBA
Forever.
for more than 30 years, and their TV show talking about the NBA has been just a stalwart of the whole NBA. But they got outbid by and NBC came in and Amazon came in big. But they matched, and Warner Brothers Discovery, their TNT network, they matched, and they're going to keep it. And they're paying up big time.
If they match, they keep it.
Yeah, and they did match. So they did match, and so I think they're going to keep their thing, which is good for the NBA. I mean, you want to see Charles Barkley and Shaquille and all that kind of stuff.
You know that sports is everything to traditional broadcast. Red and green on the screen, but futures up 4. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Interactive Brokers charges USD margin loan rates from 5.83% to 6.83%. Rates subject to change. Learn more at ibkr.com/compare. All right, not much movement in futures. It's earnings that are really on fire this morning. So let's get right to it. We'll start with Comcast up 2%. Revenue missed estimates, a big part of that due to a slower season at its movie studios, also its theme parks. Over to Coca-Cola up 1%, beat second quarter earnings expectation, raised its full year outlook. Shares are up about 1%, like we said. After rolling out price increases, Spotify, it actually reported second quarter subscriber growth, beat expectations. Its shares soaring up 13%. Let's head to the bond market. We have the 2-year yield 4.51%, little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.23%, and that's down 2 basis points. On the economic calendar for today, yes, we do have economics out for today. A read on June existing home sales, that's at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. U.S. readings on the economy due out later this week, as well as the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that, Lisa. From the Interactive Broker Studio this morning on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. That's all I got to say. You want to do something to make my morning? Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. You go out, you search it on YouTube, Bloomberg Podcasts, and there it is. You subscribe. You make me happy. You make Wendy Schiller happy. Last night, I got my dog-eared copy of Gateways to Democracy, an introduction to American government enhanced by the last 30 days we've had in civics. And I read cover to cover Schiller of Brown University. Wendy, I was asked this 3 times yesterday. Folks, don't somebody drive off the road. Can President Trump renege on Vance and pick somebody else now that we've gone Biden-Harris? Is there any precedent for that?
There's no precedent for that. And what's interesting is that it would undermine some Republican plans or calls to challenge the Harris, whoever the VP will be, ticket. So they're already, my understanding is, trying to launch lawsuits to say that she can't really use the money, although it's already been transferred to her because it was the Biden-Harris campaign. She's using the same campaign infrastructure. I didn't know that she would do that. I thought she might bring in her own advisors, but she's going with the Biden team for the moment. So she's basically just taking over that infrastructure. The Republicans have said they're not sure that's legal, and they also want to challenge ballot access. They want to basically say they shouldn't be on the ballot. I'm not sure they can actually do that and also then change their own construction of their presidential VP team.
So do you predict this goes to the Supreme Court, where it's basically 6-3 Trump?
No, I actually don't think the Supreme Court, will intervene this way to declare a party-nominated ticket invalid. California v. Jones, 2000, they basically said parties are entities and, they can figure out their own nominating rules. So, and because they've become so enmeshed with state governments, they look like they're legally state policy, but it's really the parties that drive their own nomination process. So I can't see them intervening on any constitutional grounds. Not that they wouldn't try, but I'm not sure this is I don't even know if they'd hear the case.
Wendy, what do you expect from Vice President Harris over the next coming days as she hits the campaign trail in earnest?
Well, it was very interesting, her remarks, to the campaign headquarters. Her tone was, here are the issues we are going to try to hit Donald Trump with. Personal issues about convictions, et cetera, because she was a prosecutor, but also reproductive rights, workers' rights, the environment. I think they're trying to get the party back to a unified place around issues they think they have the majority of Americans with them. So that will be the messaging. If she goes too personal all the time, that will just be a complete invitation for Trump and Vance to go really personal. We've already heard Vance call President Biden a quitter. I'm just not sure that rhetoric appeals to independent voters who have not, defected from Trump. Getting them back, I think that's not really the way to get them back, I don't think.
Is it fair to say, Wendy, that at this point here, the Democratic Party en masse, I'm talking donors, apparatus, the whole thing, is it behind VP Harris?
The headline this morning was that she's already secured the support of a majority of the delegates to the Democratic convention in, 48 hours, not even.
Yep.
That is remarkable, for a pace for a party, but it is astounding for the Democratic Party. I mean, a party that was literally in chaos and a mess a week ago seems to look a lot more like the Republican Party having coalesced around their team. So whether the Democrats can stay in this place for the next 100 days, that is going to be the big question.
Wendy, I put out a quote yesterday. Thank you to Mike Allen over at Axios for bringing this up. And it was the Marine Corporal from Louisiana, James Carville. And here's the quote: "The most thunderous sound in politics is the sound of a turning page." How does Donald Trump adapt to the page turning generationally for the Democratic Party?
Well, it's interesting, Tom, that you think 59 years old is page turning for the Democratic Party, because we've lived through, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and even George W. Bush, so there are younger Democrats that have also turned the page. The problem for the Democratic Party is they turn the page and then the page flips back. And that's pretty much what happened with Trump. And it's been happening electorally in a lot of places in the country that the Democrats used to think they were really rock solid, like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and certainly Ohio seems to have gone red. So that's the problem. It's not so much turning the page, it's keeping the page turned. Will Kamala Harris appeal? I think young women. To me, that's who I'm looking at. Young women. Does she sort of solidify them and mobilize, activate those? And I'm talking 24-year-olds, 26-year-olds, the generation that doesn't really vote in the same numbers as 40, 50, and 60-year-olds.
Luis No Bustamante at Pew Research, and folks, I'm reading Pew like crazy in these tumultuous times. First line of his new report on Latinos. In 2016, Latinos have grown from 27 million to a projected 36 million. Tell me about that Latino growth and how both parties adapt to it.
Well, Latino growth is important. It's younger, much, much younger, not even voting age. But, there's a statistic floating around that every minute there's a Latino individual in America that turns 18 that can vote. 48% is the turnout number for registered Latinos, the same as people under the age of 30, 34 years old. So the problem is that there is a big cache of votes that either party, I think, is competitive for, but the turnout level is still relatively low compared to Black Americans and white Americans. So until Latinos can get mobilized to regularly vote in higher numbers, I don't see them swinging a national election.
Paul, get one more in here.
Real quickly, VP announcement. When should we expect that?
Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Well, if I knew that,
Come on.
my day job. I mean, I don't know. If I were the Democrats, I'd get it done as soon as you can. Pick somebody who's been elected, maybe reelected, they've been vetted, someone like we've talked about, Andy Bashir, someone like that. Don't pick a newbie right now. But certainly, I think carrying the momentum, Kamala Harris has to solidify Kamala Harris for the Democratic Party. She's not there yet. Let that happen and then pick the VP.
Wendy, come on. I got 30 seconds. Trump and Vance are going to go after an astronaut fighter pilot. How do they do that?
Oh, you mean Mark Kelly of Arizona? If I were the Democrats, I don't take him out of Arizona because that's a tough seat to win. And we'll see how Ruben Gallegos does in this election.
To her.
Good thought.
Yeah, don't take him. You still want to keep the Senate close if you can even hang on. Taking him out of the Senate, you got a Democratic governor, but it's still a tough state.
Right.
So I'm not sure that's the strategic interest of the Democratic Party.
Treasure having you on. Wendy Schiller, thank you so much. Nobody gets more hate mail than Wendy Schiller. She's like a magnet. Professor Schiller, Taubman Center, Brown University, driving their international relations forward. Your question was great, Paul. I mean, then she's saying now.
Yeah. Some people say you can wait
by
until
the Sunday talk
convention,
shows,
or
right?
Some people say now. Some people you can wait to the convention. I don't know. So we'll see. But again, she made a great point. I didn't even think about it. Don't take somebody out of the Senate.
Well, that's the way these pros.
Yeah, that's the way the pros think. Yeah, I know. I was like you, astronaut. How cool would that be? But Wendy Schiller's she's thinking like 3 steps ahead of us.
Yeah, exactly. Wendy Schiller, we hope all our guests are at least 2 steps ahead of us. Usually that's the case. Lisa, don't agree so quickly over there. Green on the screen, futures up 5. We're in a frenzy of earnings, including Lawrence Culp of GE Aerospace in the 8 o'clock hour. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. A heavy week for earnings. Companies representing 29% of the S&P 500's market value, they're set to report this week. Investors waiting to see if that rally in tech stocks really has some room to grow. Today, we're going to get some insight. We have Tesla and Alphabet reporting after the close. Tesla's operating margin may shrink for a sixth consecutive quarter, with analysts looking to report on its Model 3. Also to hear about its robo-taxi, AI offerings. That should push Alphabet's Google Cloud revenue and YouTube ad sales higher. We shall see. Meanwhile, cybersecurity startup Wiz, well, it's rejected Alphabet's takeover bid of as much as $23 billion. It's going to stick to its IPO plans instead. And Google reversing course is deciding to keep its ad cookies in its Chrome Red browser after all. Alphabet shares checking in with them, little change. Tesla up more than 1%. Also after the close, we'll hear from the likes of Visa, Capital One Financial. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield 4.51%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.23%, and that's down 2 basis points. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciated. Thanks out on YouTube. Live chat. I'm learning the country from live chat.
Sure.
Everybody's everywhere. Norm is in Wisconsin. Thank you, Norm. He's in, are you ready?
Ready.
The Apostle Islands, and it's the most remote part of it's called Big Bay Lagoon.
Really?
In the middle of
Never
nowhere in Lake Superior. Cue the Gordon Lightfoot music.
Yeah, absolutely.
Joining us right now, Laura Davison. She doesn't know who Gordon Lightfoot is. Laura Davison of Bloomberg News Washington here. With all that's going on, Laura, let's get granular as we just did with Professor Schiller. How does Trump, how does Harris, how do they win Wisconsin?
So Harris is headed there today. Of course, Trump spent much of last week there. That is one of the closer swing states. Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin are sort of all in that, range where, Harris is, poised to poll, about as well, maybe a couple points behind where Trump is. But Wisconsin is kind of a weird state. The economy is pretty good there, but people don't feel it. I spoke with the Republican Party chair of Wisconsin last week when I was in Milwaukee for the RNC, and there's a big disconnect that we're seeing nationwide, but more so even in Wisconsin, just because the economy there is much better than nationwide, yet people don't feel it.
What do you think I am, dumb, Laura? Come on. Dane County, Madison, Wisconsin, has 102% of the Democrats in Wisconsin. How does Vice President Harris get the people of the University of Wisconsin-Madison to turn out?
This is, thankfully for Harris, something that she's good at. She's done a whole college tour, while she was vice president. She frequently talks about how she loves Gen Z. That's not something you hear all the time. So she's going to really need to double down on that college population, get those students out to vote, making sure her campaign has those people registered. They're registered in the swing state of Wisconsin and not in Illinois or wherever they, came from. So that will be a key strategy for her campaign.
Laura, you're based in Washington, D.C. Give us a sense of how united the Democrats in D.C., the apparatus, is behind this Biden campaign. Are we all kind of full steam ahead?
Full steam ahead. Harris went to the campaign headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware yesterday. It was sort of a big party atmosphere. Democrats in D.C. are so excited that they still are kind of forgetting that Harris is not leading in the polls. Trump is still leading. She's, some early signs point that she's doing better than Biden was. That, obviously the money coming in is very exciting. But one of the things that people, while there's a sense of elation and a sense that, Democrats may now have a fighting chance, which they weren't feeling 2 or 3 weeks ago with Biden, but that there's still a lot of work to do, and that, Trump is still up, nationwide about 2 points.
How about the VP pick? A lot of folks are saying this will be the first real key decision for candidate Harris. What's the feeling in D.C. of how this might go and when we might learn something?
So timing-wise, it could happen sooner rather than later. Harris, last night, crossed the threshold of pledged delegates that she needs. So it's clear that she has this locked down.
Okay.
And that the next decision really goes to a running mate. There is a lot of discussion if you are a white man who's sort of in these a governor or perhaps even a key senator. Those are kind of the people that are being discussed. Andy Beshear, Josh Shapiro, J.B. Pritzker, and the like.
Laura, let me go with Greg Giroux on you, our ace county by county expert. 1960, 49.7% for JFK, 49.6% for Richard Nixon. Is that what we're heading, Laura Davison, a 1960 redux?
People have been talking about 1968, but 1960 may actually be the greater comparison here, in that this is going to be close. A lot of the playbooks that both campaigns had are now totally thrown out the window. Obviously what was the Biden campaign, 72 hours ago is now the Harris campaign. The Trump campaign they're all, in a sense, a little bit freaking out because they're trying to realize, all the messaging they've done doesn't apply anymore and they have to rebrand their opponent with only, a couple months to go until Election Day.
Laura, do we know anything from the White House about how President Biden, what role he will play over the coming months in terms of this campaign?
So when Harris visited the campaign headquarters yesterday, Biden, was still at home in Delaware, isolating with COVID, said that he planned to be fully engaged. We don't yet have a sense of what that looks like, but we already are starting to see Harris sort of come into her own. So, for example, this week, Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington. Both Harris and Biden will meet with Netanyahu, but separately. So you can kind of, see that Biden will probably take some of these more ceremonial things, freeing Harris up to be more of a campaigner and not have to be as engaged in certain issues.
What's your biggest mystery at your desk today? I mean, in this whole swirl of back and forth, Paul just talked about the vice presidential nominee and that. What's the Laura Davison mystery you need to solve on a Tuesday?
The number one is VP pick, and particularly if any donors are having backroom talks on who they want, and if there's any way to sway the vice president's pick.
Civics 101, the nominee picks the VP. Is that not accurate here?
That is in fact accurate. And she has some time. She could do what Trump did and wait, up until hours before, she, by party rules is mandated to pick someone at the DNC. She could also pick someone far sooner to go ahead and get that person starting to campaign.
So let's flash forward, I guess, or fast forward to the convention coming up. What's the expectation in Washington about what the Democrats are going to want to achieve at this convention now that they have a unified pick?
It will be about getting, anyone who felt that they got left behind, in factions of the party, making sure that they feel unified. That was a key point of the Republicans' convention last week. The other thing, is looking at what does the platform look like? Democrats are more serious than their Republican counterparts on what are the policy picks. Harris is not one-to-one on Biden. We'll see how much she tries to put her own stamp versus just continuing with the previous administration.
Last night in the Zeitgeist, I'll pick on Twitter, but I don't know where I saw it, was a blue hat for Harris, and it said, "Make laughter great again," which is all, what, in giggles, except gravitas is in order. How does Vice President Harris develop gravitas? Does she have to do a photo shoot on an aircraft carrier? How does she get that serious, conservative, military defense tone going?
That's something we'll see her probably, go to some of these military sites, have her put her out, in front of some of these more, quote, manly issues. We've seen her, to date, really focus more on things like, abortion restrictions or even gun control, kind of issues that appeal to women and younger people. She's also going to need to, get out there and talk to union workers. She's going to need to get out there and talk to military. So there's a kind of a swath that she hasn't been utilized on the campaign trail. So the key tell will be, how does she do, in these initial takes with these groups? Does she feel natural and comfortable like Biden is with unions? Or does she, feel, that it's a weird mix?
Lord Davison, valuable. Yep. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it this morning. I haven't thought much about the whole VP thing, but, to your question earlier, it's like, why wait? I don't understand given, the newness of all this that we're dealing with here. Futures up 5, a little lift to the market. A NASDAQ pulls back to a big day yesterday, a recovery day. 10-year real yield churning 1.94%. There's a raft a Seattle slew of economic data this week. We'll get to that here in less than an hour. But just a wall of economic data really diving in tomorrow with important GDP numbers 2 days from now. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa, Vice President Kamala Harris has raised more than $100 million since Sunday and has secured the support of enough Democratic delegates to become her party's nominee against Donald Trump. Harris sealed her status as the presumptive nominee last night after crossing the magic number of 1,976 pledged delegates, according to an unofficial Associated Press tally. Harris spoke to staffers at her campaign headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware.
It is my intention to go out and earn this nomination and to win.
Harris travels today to Milwaukee, Wisconsin for a campaign stop. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's running mate J.D. Vance held a rally in Radford, Virginia. Vance went after the current administration.
We'll fight to bring down the cost of groceries and housing. Isn't it a shame that our young people can't afford to buy a home in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's economy?
J.D. Vance went on to say, while Biden is one of the worst presidents ever, Kamala Harris is a million times worse. Officials have released body camera video that reveals a chaotic scene in which a black woman in Springfield, Illinois, who called 911 for help, was shot in the face in her home by a white sheriff's deputy. The video shows a tense moment in which former Sangamon County Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson yells at Sonia Massey over moving a pot from the stove. He threatens to shoot her. Massey ducks, and Grayson fires his pistol at her 3 times. Massey family attorney Ben Crump.
He narrates that I'm going to shoot you in the effing face, and then he shoots her in the face. I mean, it's just troubling on every level.
Grayson has pleaded not guilty to charges of first-degree murder, aggravated battery with a firearm, and official misconduct. Authorities believe they know what started a fast-moving fire that destroyed a half-dozen homes in Riverside, California. The mayor blames illegal fireworks. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Okay, Paul, we got to do this. It's in Barr's agreement.
Okay.
It's like a 125-page agreement.
I know.
Tigers, MLB best, 12-5 in July. Skubal goes out last night and just kills it against the Cleveland Indians.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, what do they do? They're playing 485-95 ball. Did they trade the franchise?
Well, right now we're 50-51.
Yeah.
So we're almost right. We're right there.
I just said that. Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm excited. I can't help it.
You're excited, but I mean, it's
and
fascinating.
Keith was
to
looking
me.
great, man. It was wow. Wow. What can I say? And meanwhile, the Yankees won, the Mets won.
Let me cut to the chase. Does he look good in a Houston Astros uniform?
See, why you want to cut me to the quick?
This is great. I mean, we have to do this, folks. It's in Barr's agreement, but the basic idea here is it's a trade deadline in 8-9 days, and the Tigers are in no man's land.
Yeah, but still, we're in play, and if we can win the next couple of games,
sure,
we're right
stay
there.
In it. Yeah, why not?
Yeah,
It's like therapy.
The deal.
It's therapy.
We're not the Chicago White Sox, I tell you that.
Oh boy.
Oof.
No, come on. We want to get from Benny, and she went Victoria.
I'm sorry.
Hey, Benny, come on.
Okay.
She won't come on if you badmouth the White Sox.
Okay.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Our obligatory Detroit Tigers trade deadline update. Was that painful, Paul?
Yeah, no, it's all right.
How about those
Detroit's in it.
Yankees? They had one guy who's like batting 142, and he actually, here deep into July, hit his first dinger.
LeMahieu, yeah, I mean, it's just been a huge disappointment. But when the Yankees hit like a gajillion home runs in a game, they'll win. But if they don't, they don't. They don't win. So it's just they're all about the home run. Nothing's changed in 20 years.
In our next segment, we'll talk about the Baltimore Orioles because
yes,
we need to get
it's in our best interest to talk
End of
about
the month,
the
we get a paycheck and we have to talk about the Orioles. Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX from that 16 level, 14.89.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Little movement in futures right now. NASDAQ futures down 12 points. Dow futures down 21 points. S&P futures down about 3 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.51%. Little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.23%, and that's down 1 basis point. We have spot gold. Oh, my screen just moved over here. There we go. Spot gold is lower this
Never
morning.
happens to Karen Moscow.
We're going to explain that. My screen just disappeared on me. Let's get to earnings because that's a big story of the day. CrowdStrike up 0.5%. CEO called to testify before a House committee after last week's global IT meltdown. And that tech outage still having a big impact on Delta. The airline says it expects to cancel more flights this week. Shares are up. Still, though, about a
Stop there. This is important. Yes. This is important. Is Delta still in a shock?
Still having issues.
On Tuesday?
Still, yes, on Tuesday. This happened on Friday of last week. I know. It's a big problem, especially for people traveling. We'll get to the cars. Porsche down 3% in Germany. Shares fell the most on record. It issued a profit warning, cut its outlook. And then Toyota, this is interesting. It will buy back $5.2 billion worth of its stock from major Japanese banks and insurers. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Paul, we got to stop the show. Oil, West Texas Intermediate, 77.96.
Exactly.
This is not getting enough airtime.
No, it isn't. And because we've been hovering up north of 80 for, several months here. But again, it kind of goes to the demand issue of what I'm hearing from the energy folks here as opposed to supply.
The slowdown.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So just kind of seeing it drift down.
Further disinflationary tendency. Bruce Kasman at JP Morgan suggesting that's where we are.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Daily look at the front pages brought to you by IBKR. Financial advisors switch to interactive brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey. Custody solutions, no. Ticket charges, no. Conflicts of your interest, do that at ibkr.com/RIA. Let me do that again. It's a lot of letters. ibkr.com/RIA. Lisa has a spectacular front pages today. What do you got?
We do. Okay, so we've all been talking about the warmer weather, right? It's been hot outside. People are looking to cool off, so they want to dip in their pool. But the problem is that the pool temperature is too hot, okay? It's rising above 100 degrees. People are saying it's not refreshing. Yeah, so the homeowners, they're doing a few things. This is from the Wall Street Journal. They're throwing these large blocks of ice into the pools. They're using fountains. They're running aerators at night. They're putting canopies over their pool. They're even draining part of it, adding in colder water from the hose on top of it. And they're doing all these things. They're spending $2,500 on water chillers just to get their pool to the right temperature so they can dip their feet in.
How's the water at the beach?
Finally starting to warm up, high 60s, but still chilly. I mean, for this time of year. So, but again, I've never heard, like in this part of the world, you don't have the pool water being too warm. It's too cold. So you have to get the heaters for the pool.
We got a gunite pool for the dogs, vet bill and kennel fee, and what we do is we drain it. It gets too hot, Lisa. You're absolutely right. It gets too hot, and down it goes. And we just fill it up with cool water in the morning.
Interesting.
There you go.
That's a thing in Arizona.
Kennel fee wears his floaties. Dog food. They got them from Chewy.
Chewy.com.
I spent $10,000 at Chewy on one order, and they said Chewy floaties for kennel feed. Are you okay over there? Are you having technical
I'm having
difficulties?
screen issues. We'll figure that out in a bit.
Can you see where you're going in your scripted effort?
I can. Yes, it's just the markets that are blank right now for me. Okay, speaking of market, so if you're buying a car, there's some good news for you because manufacturers and dealers, they're slashing prices. They're doing all these incentives right now because interest rates are just too high and people don't want to buy the cars. So you have Motor Intelligence saying the average incentive packages offered on new vehicles, it rose 53% year over year. You have Hyundai, General Motors, Volkswagen, they're offering cash back, low interest rates, price cuts on top of it. So you have J.D. Power saying nearly 17% of new cars sold above manufacturer suggested retail price. That was down from about 35% last year. So if you want to buy a car, now's the time. Right. I've been putting it off, so I don't know if I should change my mind.
Well, now how about the Porsche? You had the story on Porsche. I could see you tooling around in a Porsche.
No,
yes,
that would be kind of hot, actually.
Yeah, that would.
That was the biggest fight Ken Pruitt and I had. I'd say Porsche. Ken would go mental. Like the late great
Porsche.
Ken. Folks, you've never heard profanity like that. And he'd say, it's Porsche time.
Porsche.
Go mental. I just looked at the financing for a Vespa. Thank you, Vespa Manhattan.
Yeah.
6 Grand Street there. You can slide into a Vespa. You know.
Yeah, no problem.
Are you okay over there? I'm stressed out.
I got people in my ear. It's going crazy. Let's get to social media. Okay, TikTok is coming to Spain and Ireland. We're talking about the TikTok shop where people shop on the app. It's a big thing. Mm-hmm. So they want to bring it to Spain and to Ireland as early as October. The big question, though, is this going to be a problem with the EU because they have those new laws that are kind of targeting tech companies? So that's the question there. But this is like a big thing for them. I mean, TikTok Shop is their big draw, which is bringing them in some big bucks as far as people shopping.
You can buy stuff off TikTok.
Yes, all the shoppers
all the
shop
influencers.
all the influencers are on it.
I think Tom could be an influencer.
There you go.
Absolutely, the bow tie influencer.
I mean, can you shop on Instagram?
You can shop. There's ads, and you just click. Believe me, I know my husband. He's an Instagram shopper and a Facebook shopper. It's very sad.
I did not know. I'm learning every day.
Yes, and that's where they get a lot of. So that's how they get a lot of ads on there, and that's how they generate their revenue. So. It's a big spot. Okay, Tom, this one's for you. Okay, so this is from Business Insider. A doctor say he's reversed his age from 78 to 57, and he's given out his secrets on how he did that.
There's a lot of this going on right now. Help me.
Yes. Okay, so here's what he does. Okay, his name is Dr. Michael Roizen. He's a longevity expert, Cleveland Clinic. He says it's just regular exercise, part of his routine. It's not crazy, though. Okay, he just tries to get in 10,000 steps a day. So you have to buy the watch. You got to track your steps, okay? He has a walking desk to help him get that. We might have to get that.
Okay.
Okay. We can get the walking desk for you if you want.
I mean, Rich, should we do this right here? I can stand up. Ari, help me out here. And I'm doing the walking.
Oh,
how am I doing?
You're doing all right.
How long does it take to do 10,000 steps?
It does take a while.
Just walk to Penn Station from here. That's how you do it.
You can walk. Yes, you can park your car further. That's one of the things he does. But he does 3 times a week. He's doing cardio about 50 minutes, a day. He's lifting weights too, twice a week. So you got to go in the gym, get a couple of weights. Not go as hardcore as I do, but just a couple of weights.
So what's today for you? Are we doing arms or
today
legs?
is upper body. Yes.
Upper body today.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Right.
We're all set.
Do we have an off day for you?
Yes, I got 2. I only work out 5 days a week.
Only 5 days a week.
That's because she's on a baseball diamond.
Yeah, the other 2. Yeah.
The rest of the week is. Can I mention the Olympics are sort of upon us?
Yes.
That's right. When is
like
coming
we've
up
got to
next
begin
week?
our Olympic team coverage of the Olympics. Here.
All right, I'll check that out.
Like,
I'm going to watch that.
There. Are you going to watch?
I am, if I can find it.
I'm with Michael Nathanson. I'm like,
I like the gymnastics is always good, and I don't know, the track and field. You never watch track and field except during the Olympics. So I'll watch.
Did I hear that they have breakdancing at the Olympics?
I've heard something like that. Yeah, and we still don't know whether they're going to swim in the River Seine.
Do you have one more, or is that it?
That would be it for today.
Thank you, Lisa Mateo.
Fully filled.
Lisa Mateo with the newspapers, the front pages. Thank you. And thank you to Interactive Brokers as well. Every time she does this, I learn something. She's reading like the zeitgeist and all that. What do you think about these doctors? They're like, you're whatever age, and they're going to take 20 years off your life?
I don't know.
Why is that different than the guy in the wagon train in 1890 with a bottle of whiskey saying, this is the cure-all? I don't get it. Over at Weill,
everything in moderation. Over at
Weill, come on, Weill Cornell or NYU Langone, are they telling people you can strip 20 years?
Well, you just look at people that are, you look at Brad Pitt versus what's that guy Wilmsley from the God, you remember that actor? Who was,
Helmsley.
Whatever. Just anyway.
Thor.
If you look 50 today versus 50, 30, 40 years ago,
people say that
completely different. So 60, the new 40. That's what I'm going with.
We'll have to see.
I like that.
We will have to see. Futures up 4, Dow futures up 30, and the VIX 14.90. Deep into earnings season. Again, Google this afternoon. We begin to look at, well, major shout out. Mike McKee is really caught in the travel challenges. Remember when it was fun?
In the USSR.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr. Active Tuesday here as well. Earnings coming in. Lawrence Culp in this hour with GE Aerospace.
Yes, that'll be good. I mean, he is a leader in global industrials here, and it's aerospace time. You're right, exactly.
It's GE Aerospace. How's he look at Boeing? I mean, to me, that's the question.
Exactly. You think back 10 years and how diverse GE was, 10, 15 years, and now we're there. There's just so focused.
There's a lot of that. I mean,
like a long time.
Facebook is Meta, but should they be called Instagram? I mean,
right. Yeah, good
Frito-Lay, Pepsi, same
Yep.
thing. You know,
Yep.
there's a lot of goofiness out there in company names as well. We had way too much politics last hour. We'll try to do more this hour. On economics, finance, investment, we're going to start strong here. Sophia Drossos with us here in moments. Futures up 3.5, futures up 23. Currency's boring. Sophia's going to be boring. From the Interactive Brokers Studios, it's going to be good. Lisa Mateo here with our Bloomberg Business Flash.
Yes, never boring. Good morning. Futures mixed right now. We have NASDAQ futures. They're leading the losses down about 11 points. Dow futures up 22 points. S&P futures up about 3 points. The focus shifts from U.S. politics. A heavy week for company earnings. Tesla, Alphabet report after the close. Analysts looking for details on Tesla's robo-taxi service. Also, whether AI offerings, whether that's going to boost Alphabet's Google Cloud revenue. We shall see. Before Tesla and Alphabet, though, there's a ton of other earnings to get to. We'll get to UPS, down more than 7% right now. The company missed profit estimates. That was due to higher labor costs, weaker package demand. General Motors, their profit surged 60% from a year ago, easily beating expectations. That was thanks to a strong demand for those gas-powered trucks. Shares up about 4%. And General Electric up 3%, reported a jump in second quarter profit, raised guidance for the year. GE Aerospace really took advantage of that strong demand during the summer travel season. And stay tuned here in about a half hour. We'll have GE CEO Larry Culp on live. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. This is a joy. 3-hour conversation right now with Sophia Drossos at 0.72, a truly iconic in foreign exchange at Morgan Stanley years ago. Thrilled that she could join us this morning. The correlations within the market right now, how tight are they? Is it a normal July?
Well, first of all, good morning and thanks for having me. Is it a normal July? I don't think summers are ever normal. Summers are usually characterized by less liquidity, less news flow, but this is a different summer, right? We have a lot of headlines to react to. And, market positioning has been relatively concentrated and sensitive to these headlines. So when you see one asset class move, you can see correlations across others as well.
Inflation, where are we in terms of fighting inflation? Where's the Fed in terms of fighting inflation, do you think?
So I think the Fed's probably breathing a sigh of relief. This turned out really well considering we were flirting with double-digit inflation not too long ago. I think the Fed is definitely taking comfort from the fact that the disinflation has reasserted itself. So after a bumpy path the first few months of the year, inflation's back on the downtrend. Fed's feeling pretty good.
77 handle on oil. That's all you got to know.
Yeah, that's big. Yeah. So, again, does that suggest a September rate cut is in the cards?
For me, it does. Okay. I think that the case is definitely building there. And I think what's important for investors to keep in mind is that inflation's coming off, and this is sufficient for the Fed to start dialing back the amount of policy restraint it has delivered to the economy. Right. It's not cutting because the economy is weakening. It's recalibrating the amount of restraint needed because the supply side's doing some of the work for the Fed.
The powerhouse that Mr. Cohen's put together at 0.72 with Dean Mackey's Stanford Economics, Sophia Drossos' Michigan Economics is like, it's world class. And the overlay of those two schools is don't forget fiscal. Are we forgetting our debt and deficit right now?
I don't think we're forgetting our debt and deficit. I just think that there's probably less clarity at this particular juncture. It's certainly something that people are discussing. And when we get these budget forecasts that the fiscal deficit is going to be 7% of GDP.
Should our listeners and viewers be worried about that?
Yeah, it is a pretty eye-popping number. I don't think, though, it has fully shown up into price action. And in particular, I see that in the dollar, which remains very elevated despite some of these fiscal risks that are percolating.
So a lot of folks will say that the Fed's already behind the curve, that they should be cutting rates already. Are you concerned that the Fed is, in fact, behind the curve and that is increasing a recession-type risk maybe in 25?
So I don't have the same urgency that some of these other commentators might, because this is a very different cycle. I would argue you could say the Fed's behind the curve if we're seeing the economy start to weaken materially. And that's not where we are at all. And I think this week what we'll see is that GDP will accelerate a bit from the pace that we saw in the first quarter. Consumer remains strong, and all the recent data points, again, show some pickup in momentum, which I think is going to last into the balance of the year.
How about the labor market? I mean, a 4.1% unemployment rate, that got some people's attention, but that's still, we're relatively fully employed here. Is the labor market as strong as it appears on the surface?
So I think what's different about the labor market this time is that the unemployment rate has risen because labor supply has risen.
Okay.
We usually are not in this case. Usually the unemployment rate's rising because people are getting laid off, people are getting fired. That's not what's happening here. I think the labor market remains strong. We saw a lot of fluctuations in the labor market post the pandemic. So obviously we had the pandemic, everything shut down, there was no demand for labor. But as we started to have the economy reopen, there was a pent-up demand for labor. And I think we were sorting through that pent-up demand up until very recently. But now it seems to me things are normalizing to a good level.
Ed Yardeni was in yesterday. That's called Yale Economics. And he's made very clear with his correct bullish call so far that this is his roaring 20s. Is the tone at 0.72 that this is a roaring 20s?
I don't know about roaring 20s exactly, but I'll tell you a little bit about my forecast. I'm looking for nominal GDP of 5.5% this year, and that's pretty strong. And that it sort of entails that corporate profits will remain strong, and that risky assets are going to be underpinned.
So, I mean, what is kind of driving this economy for you? Is it the consumer? Is it? I mean, we know the consumer is 70% of this economy, but is it manufacturing? Where are you seeing that growth? Because that is, again, as you mentioned, pretty solid growth.
Yeah, of course. So we are seeing the consumer remain strong, and I think maybe that there are some misconceptions about the relative strength of the consumer, maybe some concerns about the fact that goods prices are slowing, and so maybe that's restraining some of the things we're seeing in retail sales. But increasingly, the consumer is also spending on services, and so when I look at consumption overall, it remains at a trend pace, which again makes it hard to see a recession.
Diane Swank would never speak to me again if I didn't bring this up, which is Ann Arbor, go blue. And the thing that Ned Gramlich, and this is Paul, losing Rudy Dornbush at MIT and Ned Gramlich so early at Michigan was just horrific. But it's rare that a professor invents an institution, which is what Ned Gramlich did. And to me, it's I think of Matt Shapiro, where Michigan reinvented how we think about inflation. With all the Michigan heritage that you have, what's the most important thing our listeners and viewers need to understand about studying inflation?
Oh, you mentioned some of my great professors, Matt Shapiro and Ned Gramlich. With regard to inflation, I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is inflation expectations, and of course we need to keep in mind what's going on with the output gap as well in the broader economy in terms of capacity constraints. And again, in this environment, we're seeing that inflation expectations are relatively tame, relatively muted, and they are in line, I think, with keeping inflation expectations anchored and helping the Fed to do its job, giving it the confidence that it can dial back on the restraint.
This has been great. Did you notice the she wore Mets orange in today? For those on radio, we're garbed in the team color. What are they going to do with Alonso? Are they going to trade him?
So that's not my sense of the
Dean
core competency. I forecast other things, but it's exciting coming off a win. So that's my celebratory orange coming off a win. Got the Subway Series coming up.
That's
a lot to be excited about.
Great.
Yeah.
It's great. Can you see her and Dean Mackey at a Mets-Yankees game?
Sure, absolutely.
I mean,
the guy on home plate.
Sophia, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Sophia
my pleasure.
Drossos with this point. Sounds really interesting there, folks, and particularly on the inflation metric. We have PCE this week, right?
Yep.
You know, ton of economic data coming out. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Vice President Kamala Harris will be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin today for a campaign stop. Yesterday, she spoke to staffers at her campaign headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware. Harris praised Biden's work, saying she will earn the Democratic nomination to run for president. Harris also took a dig at Donald Trump, saying that in her former jobs as a prosecutor and attorney general, she, quote, took on perpetrators of all kinds.
Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
Meanwhile, the Harris campaign says it raised more than $100 million since President Biden bowed out of the race. Bloomberg's Vonnie Quinn has more from Washington.
The super PAC allied to Biden, Future Forward, had said also that it received $150 million worth of new pledges from donors who hadn't previously committed to supporting Biden or who had paused giving.
Bloomberg's Vonnie Quinn reports donors who'd been on the sidelines are coming back to the Democratic fold, including Walt Disney heir Abigail Disney. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's running mate J.D. Vance held a rally in Radford, Virginia. Vance went after Biden and the current administration.
Kamala Harris and the rest of the Democrats lied about his ability to be our president. I think we ought to kick them all out come November and replace them with some people who care about this country.
J.D. Vance went on to say, while Biden is one of the worst presidents ever, Kamala Harris is a million times worse. The director of the U.S. Secret Service is now the target of an impeachment effort following a hearing into the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life that frustrated members of both parties. The impeachment resolution charging dereliction of duty was put on the floor by South Carolina Republican Nancy Mace. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. Just getting along. Paul, you mentioned it earlier. Coca-Cola, you know, they're out, and it's an 8% per year total return. And we're so addicted to double-digit bull market returns. We're looking at 8%.
Yes. And plus, Tom, it's got a dividend yield of 3%. So, I mean, it's pretty solid there. And I'm just kind of looking at the stock here. It's up a couple of percent here in pre-market trading. It's up about 10% year to date.
They have profit. They just don't have revenue growth.
Yeah, it's
profitable.
I think that it was like just kind of a GDP kind of story, and top line. So it's all just a question of can you squeak out a couple of basis points of margin here?
So if Lawrence Culp shows up to run Coca-Cola, what's he do?
I have no idea. You can't. It just can't seem to move the needle. It's so big, and they're totally global. I'm not sure if there's any international markets that can fuel growth. So it's okay. It's a steady Eddie kind of typical staples, I guess.
Maybe they're serving Coca-Cola at Hartsfield in Atlanta right now. Delta's having all those troubles.
Oh, yes, I'm sure they are.
Probably serving Coca-Cola. 79,000 Coca-Cola employees. Red and green on the screen, VIX 14.92. From New York City, stay with us. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Not much movement in futures. Its earnings really on fire this morning, so we want to get right to it. We'll start with Comcast. Their shares falling down 2%. Revenue missed estimates. A big part of that was due to that slower season at its movie studios, also at its theme parks. You have Coca-Cola up 1%, raised its full-year outlook. Higher prices help boost its performance. Spotify also raised its prices, but that didn't stop people from signing up. Second quarter subscriber growth beat expectation. Shares up 13%. Over to the 2-year yield, 4.51%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.23%, and that's down 1 basis point. On the economic calendar for today, we get a read on June existing home sales. That comes out at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. U.S. readings on the economy, that's due out later this week, as well as the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. The next 45 minutes, just exquisite. Lawrence Culp will be with Bloomberg Surveillance here from GE Aerospace. I get more demand for do more on gold than any other topic.
Yep.
There's no question about it. There's different kind of gold people. Dennis Gartman has been absolutely brilliant about gold in yen. It's maybe the trade of the last 6 years. But the gentleman that defines the culture and the character of the different parts of the gold market is James Steele of HSBC. He's got some big fancy title, but he's just worldwide exquisite on the things of gold we don't understand. What's the biggest thing, James Steele, I get wrong when I think about gold? Straighten me out. What do I need to know about gold?
Well, Tom, you're very erudite on the subject, I must say. But there's always a difference. There's always a cleavage between the underlying physical market that millions of people participate in every day, and the investment side, which tends to be dominated by a relatively small number of people: New York, Hong Kong, London. I would say that it's understanding and marrying the two, and seeing the time difference between how one affects the other over time.
Does the jewelry market affect the next Krugerrand that Lisa Mateo buys?
Well, Lisa deserves all the gold she can get. That's all I can say. But over time, about 50% of physical demand is in jewelry, but it's slow moving. And what I mean by that is the effect on price is slow moving. It takes time for high prices to move into the market to get a price response. Also, high prices will bring on more recycling. Gold is never consumed. It's stored some other place in some other form. But I think what has happened recently, and I'm glad I'm on today, because India is the second largest consumer of gold in the world, very often the largest importer, and the Indian budget has reduced the tax on gold coming in from 15% to 6%, and so that's and for silver, and so that's quite significant. I think we're going to see, and the market has already risen on that.
So, as far as I know, gold is a commodity. That's how it comes up on the Bloomberg terminal. So that means supply, demand. Talk to us about supply and demand for gold these days.
Yes, gold is quite unique in that it's arguably a commodity and a currency at the same time. But you're certainly correct in saying that it's a commodity, but it has currency-like aspects and value to it, and it was currency for a very long time.
Yep, you're right.
Gold is produced in most countries in the world. Mine supply has been going up in response to prices, but it's not really a question of money. It's really a question of geology. So it's God, not mammon.
Right.
There's only so much gold, and what we're seeing now, and what is troubling on the supply side, longer term, is that the ore grades are dropping because, of course,
grades?
The ore grades, the amount of gold you get per amount of rock that's coming out of the ground, is dropping because we've exploited all of the. We've been looking for it considerably longer than oil.
Stop. This is important. Are we running out of gold in the ground?
No, but it's becoming harder to get it's in increasingly inhospitable and difficult places. And we have to bring up much more rock compared to
get the gold.
To get the gold.
Tell me about the price of gold. We're in a new territory. It's not like the 1980s or whatever, the whole gold hysteria. Does James Steele have a semi-log extrapolation of a trend line in gold, or is it just completely removed from normal financial math, chart math?
Well, I think, and I'm really glad you mentioned 1980 because I was thinking about it coming in this morning. Gold hit $850 in January of 1980, which I remember. And I wasn't in the business, but I do remember it. And in today's money, that's about $3,200 an ounce.
Wow.
Brilliant.
Okay.
So there is historical precedent for the market to go higher. However, having said that, gold dropped very sharply for the next 10 years as real rates, Volcker came in, et cetera, And also, like now, the physical market was getting squeezed because of high prices. And so certainly the trend line would show higher.
Right.
And we think a little bit higher rather. But there are limits to how high the price can go, especially say after the U.S. elections, where we'll know who the president is. Geopolitical risk is very high, and that may calm down.
Well, do you have a 12-month price target, and is it based off a disinflationary, inflationary dynamic? Is it a traditional Volcker worry about inflation?
Well, yes. I mean, real rates have been... one of the interesting things about the market is that since the end of 2022, there's been a disconnect between real rates and the gold price. The gold has continued to go up, and so did real rates. Now, we think over time that relationship, which is rock solid for decades, will reemerge, and that we'll see a little bit of weight on the gold market next year. This year, we're looking for a high of around 2,600, but weakness as we get towards the end of the year.
A friend emails in, and this comes off the Arnaud Bloomberg Business Week, huge magazine we had last week. The Serpenti Viper bracelet at Bulgari, pricing in at 6,600. What's the gold markup on the Serpenti Viper bracelet? I'm just curious.
Well, that one, I'm afraid that's above my pay grade, Tom. But the markup on jewelry can be several $100%.
Oh, really?
Now you're paying for a lot. You know, you're paying for a lot of craftsmanship. You're paying for something you can buy on Fifth Avenue, City, Covent Garden, Ginzo. So really it's high.
But
that can fall. I mean, I've stood and bought a gold chain in a souk in Dubai, and the chap's plugged into Bloomberg because his margin is minuscule, 10-15%. He can't afford, and he's changing it by $5-10 as we're speaking. So the markup can be quite radical.
Do they melt that down and give it to Dana Telsey to walk over to 57th Street to Bulgari? Is that how that works?
Well, it's all gold, depending upon the caratage, and it's depending upon what you want, how you want it made, and who you want to buy it from. But, there's a lot goes into exquisite gold items, particularly from Italy. I mean, they can really make very, very fine jewelry items.
My emails lighten up right now.
Exactly.
So continue,
200%.
Blow the break, continue with this conversation, says Mrs. Keene. James Steele, I hate you. Thank you so much with HSBC.
He's coming back.
Oh, he's coming back. I'm sorry.
Other stuff I want to talk about.
No one told me.
Silver. That's outperforming gold this year.
Silver we're talking?
I don't know. I'm talking silver because that's outperforming gold.
Silver, and what also is interesting is platinum. That's
all right, we're going to come back. We got a lot to talk about.
We got a lot to talk about. James Steele, HSBC, with us here. And, of course, in the oil complex, 77 West Texas Intermediate, 77.87. That was 90 a cup of coffee ago. Brent crude, can it get to a 79? 81.85, down 55 cents on Brent crude. Gold, steel, the market surges off James Steele's commentary, 24.55 on gold. We'll come back, yes, on platinum, on silver. Bloomberg Surveillance, good morning.
24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Big week for earnings. Companies representing 29% of the S&P 500's market value set to report this week. Investigators waiting to see if that rally in tech stocks has room to grow. Today, we're going to get some insight on that. We have Tesla and Alphabet reporting after the close. Meanwhile, cybersecurity startup Wiz has rejected Alphabet's takeover bid of as much as $23 billion. They're going to stick with its IPO plans instead. And Google decided to keep ad cookies in its Chrome web browser after all. Alphabet shares little change right now. Tesla's up more than 1%. We have Lockheed Martin up 2%, boosted its outlook for sales and profit this year. Conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East have really been fueling those orders for the defense industry. We head over to the bond market. The 2-year yield 4.51%. That's little change, and the yield on the 10-year 4.24%, and that's down 1 basis point. Futures, all red on the screen. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Our economic indicators really starting out tomorrow. A huge amount of economic data, including the PCE, GDP numbers coming up in the next number of days. Economic indicators brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors who are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. Paul Sweeney nailing it here in the last 5 minutes, saying, Tom, we got to do platinum. I'm looking back to 2002, Paul, and I got platinum and gold in tandem. Gold has some upset in the great financial crisis. You go up to about 2010, they're in tandem, and then they're not. Gold to the moon, and I don't know what happened to platinum. You know, I don't know what's going on there. Why don't you bring back our wonderful James Steele, HSBC.
James Steele, Chief Commodities Analyst for HSBC Securities USA. So again, we've talked about gold. It's been had a just record highs recently. Talk to us about platinum. What is platinum? Where do we use platinum, and what drives the trading of platinum?
Well, one of the things which Tom pointed out was that traditionally platinum had a premium to gold. And in the last few years, it's sunk to a significant discount, not just to gold, but also to palladium, which it also used to have a premium to. About 40% of platinum is in jewelry.
Okay.
And the locus of that market was China. And a favorite wedding ring was a platinum ring. And with the decline in the marriages in China it's a demographic issue. Over the past 8 to 12 years, there's been a decline in platinum jewelry demand.
Really?
Yeah. Now that's bottoming out, and we're beginning to see a rise in platinum jewelry demand, especially outside of China. 40% of it is in autocatalytic converters.
That's it.
Heavily in diesel. But now, and this is what's exciting about, one of the things that's exciting about platinum is that cheaper, more expensive palladium was being substituted. So platinum was beginning to make inroads against palladium in autocats. And since then, palladium has come down. But we're still seeing substitution in the auto industry. And that's supporting platinum demand.
Does an EV car need platinum?
Electric vehicles do not. And so both platinum and palladium have been hit by that. But platinum has been saved because of its substitution with palladium.
We're making jokes about Bulgari and the Serpenti bracelet. Fine. Is platinum perceived in the souks of Dubai, or I'll let you decide, Indonesia or India? Do you line up to buy platinum?
Not in the same sense. Platinum was very popular in Japan and very popular in China. It reduced its popularity there as jewelry buyers sort of shifted into gold. But it's beginning to come back now. It's very price conscious. And also, it's a beautiful Art Deco metal. And you'll find that platinum jewelry tends to increase when Art Deco becomes popular again. And
the
it is
sharper
now.
edges.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Wow.
1930s style of doing things.
What are the young people today? The rings are not, their wedding bands are not gold. What are they now? They're darker metal?
Well, a lot of it is now platinum, especially
okay.
in China.
Okay.
And
Right.
the other thing, too, is that because platinum is cheaper, they can make the wedding rings a little heavier.
Joining us now, Lisa Mateo on gold. Lisa, please, a question
And
for
diamonds.
James Steele on gold and diamonds, baubles, bangles, and beads.
Ooh. So what is, let's say if you go platinum versus gold, if you're going to buy, let's say something for somebody, which is the better bang for your buck? If you're getting something, let's say like a gold bracelet or a platinum bracelet, which is the better bang?
Well, the bang, if you just look at the price and say nothing else, and I'm not fostering gold or platinum compared to the other. I cover them all.
Yes.
But platinum would probably offer you better from a cost-conscious basis.
That's it, because Christmas is not too far. Let's not
Thinking
forget about that.
So let's talk about.
But when just a quick thing, when Tom said the supply of gold, I mean, what we're also facing more in platinum is a curb in supply because of the low prices. It doesn't come from a lot of countries. And those countries that are making it, that are producing it rather, mining it, they're having more and more difficulty because of the low price. So we're going to see restrained supply going forward.
Like, can you see Lisa sliding into the Tiffany Victoria tennis bracelet?
Oh, yeah.
In platinum with diamonds and pearls?
What's that going to set, Mr. Mateo?
$31,000.
$31,000?
$31,000.
I'll get Mr. Mateo on that.
For that. And who's buying it? Is it? I guess my key question is platinum a cultural embedded element of our psychology like gold, or is it still tangential?
Yes, but it would be more based on East Asian cultures than in the West.
So which of these precious metals 3 to 5 years out is the James Steele prediction?
I would say platinum, based on the supply. You can't. It's not oil. You can't drill quickly and get oil, and you can't cap a mine quickly either. And we do have a limited amount of supply that's going to come from South Africa and Russia in the years to come. I'm not saying the supply won't increase. It won't increase next year or this year. But eventually, we're going to run into issues there, and also the smaller countries that produce it, which is North America and Zimbabwe, it's going to be difficult for them to gear up as well. So we are facing a more limited supply. Now, the issue is how much we have in above ground stocks.
So for Lisa Mateo, the Tiffany Victoria, using a unique combination of cuts for a distinctly romantic sensibility, that's an investment?
I never regard jewelry as an investment. ETFs, bars are investments.
Work with me here.
Yes.
Work with me.
That's not to say that jewelry is not of value, but it's. But in the East, you struck on a good point actually. In Asia, in gold and to a limited degree in silver. It's a mix of investment and luxury, whereas in the West there's strict definitions between the luxury component of precious metals and the investment component. That's not the case in India or China.
This is so valuable when you travel. I mean, you're world renowned on this. What's a question they ask you in India? What's the question? You're going to Jakarta, James Steele in Jakarta.
Of course. HSBC.
Incredible. HSBC, Hong Kong, Shanghai Bank. What's the question they ask that we don't ask?
I think it's probably from the supply end. When I speak to producers, they want to know, what does Wall Street think? What does the City of London think? What are the hedge funds doing? When you talk to jewelers, they want to know how much is coming out of the mines. A big question now that I'm asked universally is central bank policy. Central banks have emerged since 2022 as absolutely stupendous buyers of gold, as one of the reasons that we're up so much. Now that's moderated a wee bit this year, but it's still double the rate that it was the previous 15 years on average. Yeah. So I think I'm asked most now about official sector policy towards gold.
We did that last time we did, so I went central bank. This was fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you for your discussion of the Tiffany Victoria tennis bracelet in platinum with diamonds and pearls. James Steele, briefly.
Either way, Lisa is well deserving, I'm sure.
There's no question about that. For when you have that many softball games on the weekend, you deserve the Tiffany Victoria bracelet. James Steele, just treasure to have you with us with HSBC. A little red on the screen now, futures at -5. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Vice President Kamala Harris has secured her place as the presumptive Democratic nominee for president. Bloomberg's Jody Snyder has more from Washington.
While the delegates who indicated the support are not required to back her nomination, this underscores how much of a hold she's got on the Democratic ticket this quickly. And those fundraising numbers are just pretty astounding given the amount of time, the short amount of time that took.
Bloomberg's Jody Snyder reports the Harris campaign says it raised more than $100 million since Sunday evening in the hours after President Biden left the race. Senator J.D. Vance held his first rally since former President Trump picked him as his running mate. He told supporters about his political agenda at his hometown high school in Middletown, Ohio.
We're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to shut down that border. We're going to put America's citizens first because that's what America's citizens are going to elect us to do. It's common sense.
J.D. Vance also held a rally in Radford, Virginia yesterday. The families of American hostages held by Hamas met with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan at the White House ahead of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress tomorrow. The Israeli leader is in Washington. The families demanded that Netanyahu accept a peace deal to free the hostages. Rachel Goldberg-Polin is the mother of American hostage Hirsch Goldberg-Polin.
We know that there are just a couple people deciding at this point, and we have optimism and hope and faith that these deciders will make the right decisions and we can start this process now.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu said conditions for a ceasefire and hostage deal with Hamas are becoming ripe, suggesting the two sides are getting closer to agreeing to at least a temporary halt to their war in Gaza. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. From Paul Corp to Danaher to the disaster that was General Electric after GE Capital, Kaizen is one of the methods of Lawrence Culp, and it's wrapped around leadership, commitment, engage every employee, focus on the process, and embrace incremental changes. That's the, Paul, the man. That's what they're teaching at Duke.
Yep.
That's the management level here. But I would say the capital allocation and the budget process is how I perceive Lawrence Culp.
Yeah, exactly. And Tom, if you look at if you use the PGEO function on the Bloomberg terminal, it gives you the kind of the lines of business here. And 73% of their business is commercial engines and services. The remainder is defense and propulsion technologies. That's it. That's what this company...
They did a reorg.
They did over, I'm going to say,
reorg.
15 years. It's almost since Jack Welch. They've been trying to figure out what is the correct collection of assets here. And no more do you have... the financial business, NBC, Universal, infrastructure, industrial. I mean, all those line items are just gone. And it's now down to, engines and defense. And that's it. And I think the street likes it. That's kind of what the street has been calling for a long time. And we see the stock here. Stock has had a nice run here. It's up 60% year to date.
Right.
It's up over 85% over the past 12 months. So the street likes what it sees.
Coming up, our Guy Johnson with Lawrence Culp of GE Aerospace. Looking forward to that. We haven't talked politics in 42 minutes, 37 seconds.
It's crazy.
So,
we got to get right back to it.
Gura had a tantrum. So coming up, David Gura, we'll do that after Lawrence Culp. We'll see how that goes. Red on the screen, futures at -3. The VIX exactly 15. Currency markets churning would be the way. It is an earnings day. Google this afternoon. Bloomberg Surveillance. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. We welcome you all across this nation and worldwide. Coming up, we will talk about the politics of the moment. General Electric, and when we look out the window and we look at the idea, the pros look at it as engines that happen to have a ship. The guy that's turned it around is Lawrence Culp. In England, our Guy Johnson with Lawrence Culp.
Yeah, we've got some aerospace royalty here in the room. As you say, Larry Culp, the CEO and chair of General Electric, the world's biggest jet engine manufacturer. John, this is a company that is newly independent. It's a standalone business. The first time we've seen numbers being reported on that basis, and the numbers we've seen being reported look good and being taken well by the market. The stock, I think, is up circa 3% this morning. It looks like a beat and a raise from Larry Culp. Good morning. Good afternoon, as I probably should say. Nice to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Guy, good to be with you.
Talk me through the strength. Talk me through where it has come from. Where is the strength of this beat and raise within the business?
Well, Guy, it's really rooted in the demand that we see both from the airlines and from the airframers for more of what we do. 70% of GE Aerospace on a standalone basis comes in the aftermarket, supporting the airlines with parts, with services of all types to keep today's fleets in the air. And given the activity that they're seeing with the flying public, it's all we can do to keep up with what they'd like to see from us. So the 60+% improvement in earnings, the nearly 20% improvement in free cash that we announced today is really a function of the strength that we're seeing in our commercial engines and services business in the aftermarket.
Is that sustainable? Does that carry on throughout the rest of this year into 2025? Is that something that is here now, gone tomorrow? Because we're starting to see some warnings coming through, particularly from the narrow-body operators in the United States and as of the beginning of this week with Ryanair here in Europe.
Well, we've certainly seen those as well. Seems like that commentary is really geared more toward pricing than anything else. But if you look at our order book in the second quarter alone, nearly 40% year over year. We see our utilization of the fleets, both the mature fleet, which we power with the CFM56.
Yep.
That has been steady, an engine that folks thought might begin to fade. Our newer generation technology, the LEAP engine on both the 737 MAX and the Neo at Airbus, that's probably up 4 points in terms of share. So our utilization could not be higher. Even just looking at the third quarter here, we have probably 90% of our third quarter projection in backlog today with respect to parts. So in terms of the demand signals we're seeing from our customers, things are strong.
So the hours being flown are going to remain consistent, you think?
We believe so. Okay. And going forward, they're going to increase.
That's the kind of the older story. That's the existing fleet that's already out there. As you say, the maintenance story is very strong. The margin off that is very, very strong. The story certainly at the Farnborough Air Show and all the air shows recently and throughout this industry has been what has been happening with the supply chain. Airbus lowering its guidance for the year, talking about engines within that guidance. Is the supply chain story getting better or is it getting worse?
Guy, I'm strongly of the view it's getting better. It's really all about the rate of improvement.
Right.
And what we shared earlier today with investors is that we didn't have the output that we had anticipated in the second quarter with our newest generation engine in particular, with our LEAP engine. But we're going in using our flight deck, our lean operating model to help our suppliers help us. Jointly problem solving, really understanding constraints at the point of impact. And we saw tremendous results from that in the second quarter. Didn't translate into as many deliveries, perhaps, as our airframer customers would have liked, but we saw 2/3 of the suppliers that we worked with improve their output to us by nearly twofold. So that's encouraging.
Just kind of talk me through what's happening. So originally the guidance was for a 25% improvement for that engine. Then you went, I think it was in April, you were kind of 10-15. Now you're at kind of flat to 5.
Exactly.
That feels like it's not getting better. You're telling me that it is, though below the surface, getting better.
It's not getting better at the rate that we had anticipated.
Yeah.
But it's getting better if you look at the sequential trends. And that, from an operating perspective, that's all that really matters. Week in, week out, quarter in, quarter out, are we seeing more and are we seeing more predictably?
Okay.
We're getting better in that regard. I'm encouraged by what I've seen here just in the first 3 weeks of July. A lot of work, not only in the second half still in front of us, but as we think about 25 and 26, but working in that way, yielding those sorts of results will, I think, put us all on the ramp.
So the benefit comes next year. That's when we start to see the big benefit coming through.
I think some of the actions that we took in the second quarter will help us in the third quarter and in the fourth quarter of this year.
Why is it taking, this was a question I put to Guillaume Faury a little bit earlier on, why is it taking so long to resolve this issue within the supply chain?
Well, I saw Guillaume yesterday. We talk about this every time we're together. I think it's important for everyone to remember, Guy, that we turned the industry down to almost zero during the pandemic. And what we're trying to do now is turn it all the way back on. And that's hard. We lost not only people during the pandemic, we lost a tremendous amount of experience, technical people throughout the supply chain, in Guillaume's facilities at Boeing, at GE Aerospace, and throughout the supply chain. We're building all of that capability back. And because those roles are filled now not by a 58-year-old, but perhaps by a 28-year-old, there's a lot we have to do in terms of not only adding capacity, but capability to meet the ramp that we all are embarked upon.
He told me this morning he thinks we've probably got another couple of years of it to go, though, until we resolve some of these issues. Does that timeline feel kind of about right to you as well?
We're trying to make progress every week, but I think this is a multi-year effort that the industry faces.
In terms of your, we bring up Guillaume Faury, how is your relationship changing with Airbus? You traditionally been really tight with Boeing. Tom Enders, who I know well, you know well now, is now on your board. Does that signal a change in relationship with Airbus?
Well, I think we have served both of the major airframers well over time, right? We don't have over 2/3 of the departures in the narrow-body space serving Boeing alone. We're very excited about the news we put out last week with the A321 XLR now approved, but only approved with the GE LEAP 1A, right, our engine. So there's a lot that we're doing with Airbus, not only in terms of the ramp, but next generation technology as well. And we're trying to be as strong and as good a partner to Guillaume and Christian and their teams as we possibly can be. We want to do the same thing with the folks at Boeing, of course. We can do that as long as we invest in technology, use flight deck to deliver safety, quality, delivery, and cost to their requirements, and jointly serve the airlines.
Defense, just spend a moment, if we can, as we conclude things, talking about defense. Do you think defense spending is going up? Do you think a Trump presidency would mean greater defense spending? Do you see defense spending going up in Europe in a Trump presidency because of the requirements in terms of debt to GDP, not debt to GDP, spending to GDP? How do you see that story progressing, and what does it mean ultimately for GE?
Well, I think on both sides of the Atlantic, given the authorities that I speak with, spending will be paced by the threat, and the threat is only increasing. Therefore, be it in combat aircraft, be it in rotary craft, the two areas that we serve most directly, we think we will see, looking out over the next 5 to 10 years, sustained growth.
Just one final quick question before I'm forced to throw back to the studio. Was it an easy decision to continue your contract? Can I 100% rule you out of the Boeing job?
How about 101%?
101%. There you go. 101%. I know the guys in the studio were talking about this a little bit earlier on. So 101%. There you go. John, Lisa, 101%. Larry Culp is staying at GE, and a fantastic set of numbers delivered earlier on today. Looks like the market likes what it hears. Back to you.
Guy Johnson, thank you so much. On the simulcast there with John Farrow, Lisa Abramowitz, and Anne-Marie Horton. And that was a gentleman from GE as well. I would have, I'm not going to mince words, Paul. The listeners and viewers want to know about the Boeing MAX.
Yes.
I think there's a massive, I think there's a massive de-link between the public and the financial types on this. And to hear Lawrence Culp talk about Boeing MAX, which he's knee-deep in at GE, would be, important.
Exactly. And again, Guy asked that question that had to be asked about potentially Larry Culp thinking about moving to Boeing, and he said 100%, 101% not.
There it was. Lawrence Culp with GE Aerospace is, well, we've got lots coming up. David Gurr and Zach Cohn will join us here at about 9:15. We've got an incredibly important voice on Google and technology to begin our next hour. Stay with us on YouTube, on Android Auto, on Apple CarPlay. Spirit for Lisa Mateo. Good morning.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Bloomberg Surveillance Worldwide. We're going to get right to it. We've got an important guest on a tight schedule. We're going to talk tech here on this day of Alphabet. We welcome all of you on YouTube, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, across this nation. Good morning, San Francisco. Mark Lehman with us here in moments. From the Interactive Broker Studios with our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got little movement in futures. NASDAQ futures down about 28 points. Dow futures down about 6. S&P futures down 1. And of course, the big focus, you said it, Tesla, Alphabet after the close. Analysts looking for some details on Tesla's robo-taxi service. Also, waiting to see whether those price cuts will happen with many of its cars. And also whether AI offerings will boost Alphabet's Google's cloud revenue. We'll see. But before that, we have other earnings to talk to. UPS down more than 10% right now. The company missed profit estimates due to that high labor cost, weaker package demand. General Motors profit, well, that surged 60% from a year ago. It beat expectations. That was thanks to a strong demand for those gas-powered trucks. Shares up about 2%. And General Electric up nearly 3%. Reported that jump in second quarter profit, raised its guidance for the year. GE Aerospace really took advantage of that strong demand during the summer travel season. Its CEO, Larry Culp, just told Bloomberg's Guy Johnson that growth is sustainable. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Without question, into this tech earnings season, this is our definitive conversation. We're thrilled to have here for a precious set of minutes, Mark Lehman of JMP, definitive going back to, ready, Paul? Robertson Stevens, Thomas Weissel.
Yep.
Montgomery. You died for the road trip to San Francisco to get in front of Mark Lehman. He joins us here with the heritage of American technology. Google up 20% per year. There is an industry global bet that the Magnificent Seven can continue double-digit excellence. Are you in doubt?
Well, it depends on whether you're talking about stock performance or earnings. I do think the earnings momentum will continue. I do think this AI wave, which has been discussed greatly, is real. And the question is what we're going to pay for it. The last 2 weeks, we've decided to pay less for it. But I don't think the earnings momentum and the quality of the earnings is going to slow down.
Is there a giddiness in your San Francisco on Mag 7, or is it different than when Sweeney went down in flames in March of 2000?
Listen, I think a lot of the excitement and exuberance is due to earnings as opposed to hype. And I think that we've been saying that for a long time. And each quarter we're waiting for that depression in earnings or that miss, and we've yet to see it.
Hey, Mark, as Tom pointed out, you've got the great heritage of that West Coast investment banking, some of the great firms there that really propelled some of the early days of the internet. How is the AI discussion these days different from some of those discussions in the late 90s?
It's a great question. I think a lot has to do with back then, the hype was just show up, have a meeting, get your capital.
Yep.
Now it's a much more disciplined discussion. I think there's way fewer of these kind of larks, if you will, that are being created. And I think the big firms are collaborating. So it's not just the venture capitalists, but the big installed tech companies. We mentioned Google. Obviously, Microsoft's got a big stake. But I think that the dynamism of the investment is way different than it was years ago. Way different.
On that point, I mean, why don't we have more IPOs? I thought we'd had more tech IPOs. We have a very strong market if you just look at the S&P returns. And historically, Silicon Valley would have been right at the forefront.
It's perplexing. The IPOs have worked. We look at companies that Citizens has been on recently, whether it's Reddit or some of the other wonderful stocks that have come public, but there are so few. And I think there's a combination of factors. One is valuations for 2020 have not been exceeded. Two is I think there's infinite amount of private capital. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. Listen, we got a piece of news last night that Wiz decided to not be bought by Google, the biggest.
Translate that. What's that mean?
So Wiz is a big security company based in Israel. They've been floating a rumor that Google was going to buy them for $23 billion after a $14 billion capital raise just in May. They announced last night that they're going to go forward, and he said plainly, the CEO, we want to go public. Maybe that's the kind of news we need to hear, because we have not heard that, frankly, from a big private company like that in a while.
The poster child right now is Reddit, 34, moonshot, out to 65, sobriety in early April, and then a responsible linear regression higher. How can there be other Reddits? Or does, Paul, you tell me, Apollo Global Management capture all the IPOs? I don't know. How do you do more Reddits?
I think you got to get one, then get three, then get five. And Reddit,
it's
by
that
the way,
grinding out.
It really is. And it's somebody saying, we're not going to listen to the big capital markets advisors who lead manage every one of those deals and says you have to be 500 million in float, you have to be 250 in ARR to go public. And I talk to portfolio managers every day. That is not true. There is more demand from portfolio managers than there is supply. That is rare. So you'll see Reddit, when they execute, get a better valuation in the public markets.
I mean, Paul, what's amazing now is it used to be a rubber chicken circuit.
Yeah.
You'd go out, you get your little plastic thing you put by your window. Now they're serving kale salads. That's the major. That's the major difference.
So private capital, Mark, you said there's plenty of it out there. If Tom Keene goes to, Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road, whatever it is, and tries to get something financed, can he or she get a new idea financed today?
It's a market that's definitely, I keep saying there's too many companies chasing too few capital and too much capital chasing too few companies. So the good ones are getting overvalued. The small companies are having a harder time. There is plenty of capital right now, but I will tell you what I'm also hearing. There have not been a lot of exits, and the M&A market is heating up a little bit. I have not been this optimistic about both the M&A market and the IPO market in a couple years. I kept hoping it was going to be a 24 phenomena. I'm sadly thinking it's a 25 phenomena.
Right. We got to ask this one question. The gloom on San Francisco, pandemic, post-pandemic, has been tangible. And I'm hearing Taylor Riggs and others just saying to me, it's all baloney. It's just not that bad. Give us an update on San Francisco into 2025.
We have a big election coming in November, like the country does. It's not as bad as the press. The people who think it's the worst are the people who have not been there. But we have our problems. And every urban city has a problem. We have a fentanyl problem. We have a homeless problem. We have a downtown urban commercial real estate problem.
Do you see a political shift there going on as Vancouver is another example?
I do.
And Portland faces.
I do. And I see a lot of the shift happening right in front of our eyes. Again, that election is a big deal for us, like it is for a lot of municipalities. But the hype is not as bad as the reality. That being said, we have problems. We have a central real estate district that is underoccupied. That needs to change, and we need to rethink cities. Like every city needs to rethink themselves.
I got to let you go here. You got to go get beaten up by John Farrell. But the bottom line, Mark Lehman, are the fancy guys in Paul Sweeney's Sand Hills, are they engaged in the salvation of San Francisco?
I think there are some people who have decided to leave San Francisco. I analogize it to your spouse putting you through college and then you decided to leave them once you get the big job. There's a lot of people who are staying, Mark Benioff and others, who are putting their dollars where their mouth
Good
is
to hear that.
and doing it real time.
Okay.
We're Save San Francisco. The head of Prologis, Hamid, is doing an unbelievable job. San Francisco has been, I've been dead since I lived there. It's going to come back.
When you talk to Benioff, when you talk to Mandolin Man, tell Benioff we want him on the show for 2 blocks.
Done.
We got to get it. We got to get it done. Mark, you should see his mandolin collection. It's like to die for.
Oh, nice
it's like world, like Louvre, Met, famous. Mark Lehman, JMP. Thank you so much for that. What a way to get into the technology season. Of course, Google. I'm sorry, Mark. I will not call it Alphabet. Get over it. Google this afternoon, and of course, much more to come here. On the market and the churning, we've been watching oil this morning further south, down 74 cents on American West Texas Intermediate. Wow, 77.65. Brent crude down 69 cents, not near 79 handle, but 81.70 on global oil and gold. Thank you, James Steele, up $14, $2,456 on gold. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa. Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign says it raised more than $100 million since Sunday and has secured the support of enough Democratic delegates to become her party's nominee against Donald Trump. That's according to an Associated Press survey taken in the aftermath of President Joe Biden's decision to drop his bid for re-election. At their campaign headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, Biden called in to give remarks before Harris spoke.
I won't be on the ticket, but I'm still going to be fully engaged. I've got 6 months left of my presidency. I'm determined to get as much done as I possibly can, both foreign policy and domestic policy.
Meanwhile, former President Trump's running mate says President Biden is one of the worst presidents in America. J.D. Vance at a rally in Radford, Virginia, says, though, Kamala Harris is a million times worse. Illinois State Police, on behalf of the Sangamon County State Attorney, released the body-worn camera video from the officer-involved shooting of Sonia Massey on July 6th. Sangamon County Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson shot the 36-year-old unarmed woman in the face, killing her after she called police to report a suspected intruder in her home. Massey family attorney Ben Crump on the officer involved.
Instead of having an ounce of humanity, he says that F&B was crazy. Where is the humanity?
Grayson has been indicted and charged with first-degree murder. An American game show legend is being honored with a forever stamp. Beloved Jeopardy host Alex Trebek was honored Monday. The contestant turned current host Ken Jennings called his predecessor a gifted star.
And really the only reason I can even keep up with it as the host today is because I had that great pleasure of watching Alex work up close for so many years.
That's right. For me, it's personal. The Canadian-born Trebek, who became an American citizen, passed away in 2020 after a battle with stage 4 pancreatic cancer at age 80. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, did you ever work with Alex Trebek? With all your acclaim on game shows?
I saw him work on Classic Concentration when I was a contestant, and to see him do it, it really was amazing. I mean, I'm like, wow. It's like, and I had been in the business for several years, and I'm like, I don't know a doggone thing compared to this guy.
When you won $500,000 in concentration, did you prepare for it, or did you just show up?
No. I hate to put it like this, but I was built for this game show. I can't play any other game show but concentration because I got every home version of the game, and I never missed it when it was on TV in the original version.
Good, very good. Michael Barr, thank you so much. Paul, on Mark Lehman there, I thought that was brilliant. Yep. And what he said there about the future of San Francisco, and what this comes down to, and you've lived it far more than me, is the fancy people like an Atherton, fancy done.
Sure.
They're all, having iced teas at the Menlo Circus Club.
Yep.
And the bottom line is, what are they going to do about the region, given the prosperity that's been wrought? I'm fascinated by it.
I am too. I mean, it's just, San Francisco is just one of my favorite cities in the world, actually. When some of my European friends, when they say, hey, I'm bringing the family over to the U.S. for the month of July, where should I go? And I said, yeah, I know you can do New York and Vegas and blah, 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 blah. Spend 3 or 4 or 5 days in the Bay Area, San Francisco downtown, all the areas around San Francisco and the Bay are just, I think, it's an extraordinary part of the country. And San Francisco will come back. We saw it with the dot-com crisis. They will come back.
I see, as I mentioned, folks from Vancouver down to Portland and to San Francisco, some challenges. Mr. Lehman suggesting that the politics would shift here, perhaps in November. We shift to a data check. Futures at -4, Dow futures at -19. Google this afternoon. Carol Masser, Tim Stevanovic with that. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Little movement in futures right now. NASDAQ futures down 38 points. Dow futures down 30. S&P futures down 4. We have the 2-year yield at 4.50%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.23%. That's down 1 basis point. We head over to commodities. We have spot gold higher, $2,404 an ounce. Brent crude, $81 a barrel. WTI crude, $77 a barrel. Over to currencies, we have the dollar stronger. Japanese yen stronger at 156.08 against the dollar. The euro, British pound weaker. Bitcoin down about 2% at 66,000. Companies making news. CrowdStrike, its CEO, has been called to testify before a House committee after last week's big IT meltdown globally. Shares rebounding, though, up nearly 2%. Delta, though, still feeling that impact from the tech outage. The airline says it expects to cancel more flights this week. And now the U.S. Department of Transportation opening up an investigation into the carrier. Shares are down about 0.1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. This is what we're going to do, and what Paul and I are always trying to do is get away from the usual political verbiage and try to talk about the themes, the backgrounds that drive forward. I think that's near impossible right now, but we're going to continue. Zach Cohen joins us, our congressional reporter for Bloomberg Government, very up to speed on both wings of our white marble Capitol. And David Gurr's got nothing to do this morning, so he stopped by. So what's the big take coming up, David Gurr? What's the big take?
We're looking at this Netanyahu visit and sort of the importance of that. Yeah. Is it important just to him and his vanity, or is it something bigger? Is it going to tell us more about the future of that conflict and the relationship between Israel and the U.S.?
It's going to be a great chat here. Here's Civics 101. I feel like I'm in a class with Wendy Schiller at Brown University. Zach Cohen, let me start with you. As a VP, the history, the tone within the halls you cover, do you want a governor or a senator? Which is it, Zach Cohen?
Well, you certainly want somebody who knows how to deal with Congress. And that was obviously one of the arguments in favor of Joe Biden's campaign back in 2020. He was a creature of the Senate more than anything else. Harris obviously has a lot less experience there. She was elected in 2016, took office in 2017, and was only really there for 4 years before she, rocketed up to the vice presidency. So she has some connections to Congress, but certainly not those that Biden had, which I think creates some interesting questions about who she picks as her running mate.
Okay.
On Netanyahu, I'll be curious to see how she handles this and whether she shows any distinction from the Biden administration's position on Israel's war in Gaza during this visit.
Interesting. David, I look at the VP thing, and let's just cut to it. Do I want a swing state governor? I'll pick Pennsylvania, or do I want an astronaut from Arizona? What's the difference?
She has a lot of compelling choices. As I've been reading in on this, it really highlights the depth of the Democratic bench that we haven't been talking about for a very long time, and that could be because just the focus has been on President Biden and his reelection. But there's a very strong list of names here, and we learned that Eric Holder, former Attorney General, now at Covington and Burling, is going to be helping the Harris campaign to go through this list, interview these individuals, and see who might be the best fit for Kamala Harris as she makes her run for the White House. But I would agree with Zach completely. I think you want somebody who knows Washington, knows how to navigate it. But this is a governor-heavy list. You mentioned Josh Shapiro; he's one. Roy Cooper, my home state of North Carolina, is another. Andy Beshear of Kentucky. We had Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan yesterday saying she's not interested in the job when she was asked by a local reporter about it. We'll see how this all shakes out. But I think, as I said yesterday, she has a little bit of time here to go through this. We had that announcement from former President Trump at the convention itself a few weeks to go yet until we get to Chicago, and it would be no small thing if she just waits until then to make that announcement.
Zach, in addition to the presidential election, some congressional elections coming up as well. Can you give us a sense of kind of how that's shaping out? Because presumably both the House and the Senate could be in play.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Biden's exit from this race offers something of a reset for some of these congressional campaigns, something that really neither party had prepared for, which makes it particularly fascinating. Republicans yesterday making the argument, Biden, from the National Republican Senatorial Committee, put out this memo that basically said, well, it was hard to translate Biden's weaknesses down ballot. And with Harris, we have somebody more of a party line we can tie some of these congressional incumbents to without losing criticism of the underpinnings of the Biden-Harris administration, talking about things like inflation and the border, of which, Republicans like to say Harris was the border czar, so to speak. But Democrats think they've got a winner in Harris to talk about to boost the base turnout. This is obviously going to be the first woman of color to head a major party national ticket. And that's something that should excite a large part of the Democratic base, including parts that they have been losing support over the years. Over the course of many cycles, Republicans have made gains with Black people, Latinos, et cetera.
What are the key races that folks like me should be paying attention to that could, in fact, I guess, just impact kind of which side of the aisle is going to be leading each house?
Well, you don't have to go very far. There's a couple of races in upstate New York that are really competitive in places like the Hudson Valley. Mark Molinaro, Mike Lawler have some of those competitive races in the country. These are Republicans that are representing seats that former President Donald Trump carried in 2020, that President Biden carried in 2020, and then a Republican carried in 2022. We'll see if they can do that on the same ballot presidential ticket. But Democrats certainly have their fair share of incumbents in districts that Trump carried. The National Republican Congressional Committee, for instance, is up with an ad today in Alaska, trying to take out the Democratic incumbent there, Mary Peltola.
Right.
And so there's certainly a number of swing districts at play here.
Paul, I gotta impress Gurr and Cohen. They won't come back. I mean, you guys don't know this, but we're slotting this in as a regular event.
Oh, I see.
I called up Amy Walter last night. I said, Amy, I'm dumb as wood. She runs
of the Cook Political Report.
I said, I'm dumb as wood. Give me one race. The sprawl of the Rocky Mountains north of Denver, the Colorado 8th District. The last vote around was 48.4% to 47.7%. That's a close race. David Gura, how does that jockey between, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Yadira Carvalho and the Republican? Did I butcher that?
You did. I would confess to not following this as closely as I know that Zach has, but I'll pick up on what he was saying a moment ago, and then he can weigh in here on the Colorado 8th if he wants to. But, I spoke to Governor Kathy Hochul last week, and we talked about the significance of these down-ballot races, and this was before President Biden bowed out or went to the exits, said he wasn't going to run for re-election. And this is, I think, a real fear for Democrats is that if there isn't excitement or interest in this election, it's going to hurt people, not just at the national level, but lower still. I think that there have to be a lot of candidates for office on the Democratic side who are happy at the clear infusion of energy that we've seen in these last few days and the amount of money that the Democratic Party has raised since this announcement.
I mean, Zach, this is important. Colorado 8th, Denver up to Greeley. Okay, do they want Harris and Trump to show up when they're 1 percentage point apart?
I mean, that's a key question. The Colorado's 8th district is actually one of the newer districts in the country. When Colorado, its population expanded over the years, it got a new district in 2022, and Yadira Carvalho, the Democrat that you mentioned, won that seat. And what is essentially becoming a bellwether, it sort of runs, like you said, up from Denver, up to Fort Collins, sort of east of the Rocky Mountains. And I have not seen Congresswoman Carvalho endorse Harris yet. Doesn't mean that hasn't happened, but certainly an indication that's going to be a very swingy district. Maine, too, for instance, is another one. Jared Golden, another one of these Democrats in a Trump district. Some of these... Yeah.
Mount Katahdin's in the district.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's like the LL Bean district. There's 42 people in the bottom of Maine, and there's a bunch of moose north.
Yep.
They're the constituents. Paul, get one more in here with Zach Cohen.
Well, first of all, Zach, I mean, what's the feeling in Congress, just 30 seconds here, about this candidate, VP Harris?
I think the mood was so sour on Biden at this point. I was with Tammy Baldwin last weekend in Wisconsin, and stop after stop, people were asking her, what's going on with Biden? Do you think he should drop out? It was really hard for her to even make her pitch even privately to some of these voters. She would make her stump speech, barely mention Biden, and then only be able to talk about Biden with some of these voters. And Baldwin has turned around and is actually campaigning with Vice President Harris in Milwaukee today. I think that's a good indication where a lot of these swing state Democrats who are going to determine whether Democrats maintain any sort of congressional control, how they're approaching this new nominee now that Harris has essentially clinched the nomination.
Did you guys have fun doing this? I mean, would you do it again?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, are you guys, I didn't even ask, are you guys on speaking terms?
We've never met. Now we have. We've done it over the transom. I enjoyed it. I'll do it again.
Zach Cohen, thank you. David Gura, thank you. Zach, how did I do on my pronunciation of the Congresswoman? It's
pretty good, I thought.
From 8th,
Yeah. Yadira.
That was close.
Yeah.
Yadira?
I think so.
Yadira Carvalho?
Zach's nodding.
We're going to have a lot of fun with this. Folks, seriously, this is a really interesting election, made more interesting in the last month. And Paul and I are really committed to doing this we're going to try to avoid the blather. Did we do okay
there,
Paul?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great
guess.
I've got to read up on my congressional districts. This is like a game show for me.
Amy Walter said I'm killing it.
Yeah.
Greg Giroux in awe. He's like, oh, God. This has been great. It's going to be fun to November. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. Bloomberg Surveillance. We need to get the market open. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. Now, investors really digging into a big week of earnings. Companies representing 29% of the S&P 500's market value set to report this week. A big part of the anticipation, of course, is whether that rally in tech stocks has some room to grow. We have Tesla, Alphabet after the close, but let's get to the numbers right now as we get things started. The S&P 500, little changed at 5,564. The Dow, little change as well, up nearly a point at 40,412. We have the NASDAQ down about 0.1%, 27 points at 17,981. The two-year yield, 4.51%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.24%, and that's down 1 basis point. We head over to spot gold, higher at $2,404 an ounce. We have Brent crude, $81 a barrel. WTI crude, $77 a barrel. The dollar stronger, Japanese yen stronger at 156.15 against the dollar. We have the euro, British pound weaker, Bitcoin down 2% at 66,000. At the open, I want to check in with Spotify because it was moving the markets earlier. Right now, those shares up 13%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. We had Mark Lehman with us with JMP of San Francisco. I thought that was just brilliant on technology, and I made clear that was the founding technology conversation of this earnings season. This is a really important conversation right now for Bloomberg Surveillance, and with all the support of the RIA community. Thank you, Interactive Brokers. Thank you, Commonwealth, for your support. Stewart Partners is looking as well after the new Call Your Broker, new My Guy, new, Paul, you remember the lingo from another time.
Yep.
Jim Gold has lived it. It's Smith Barney and through any number of other things as well, other opportunities in finance and investment. And he joins us right now from Stewart Partners. You have a single blistering sentence in your note that matters to every single listener and viewer. It's going to change. Where is wealth management in 5 years, or where is wealth management for our children out there?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. The topic that I think is under discussed in the media is really I talk about a succession crisis going on. So if you think about the advisor today and the client today, the client should be asking their advisor, what is your succession plan? Some recent studies have talked about in the next 10 years, 40% of all the advisors will retire. And if you extrapolate that a little further, you're looking at 60 to 75% of today's advisors will no longer be in the business in 15 years. I think what's driven that is people are living longer. People are not planning as long. They think they're going to live forever. So the advisors today that haven't retired yet, if you think about 30 years ago, they'd be dead by now.
Are new advisors coming on given fee compression? Paul, it used to be, we can make 250 beeps off this.
Right.
That's gone.
Right.
So where are the kids to take over for the fossils like me or you or Paul?
Yeah, it's also a really important topic. So I think the challenge we have is that the firms that used to train thousands of advisors a year don't do that anymore. So what you're seeing is the next gens that are coming on are typically a child of the senior producer or a relative of a senior producer. They're being brought in more as a planner, a power planner, which is terrific because you need that CFP, you need designations, you need planning, but there's clearly a shortfall. I mean, there's clearly the number of retirees versus the number of new folks coming in. You could do the math. This is not going to end well unless there's a change.
Well, one of the 4 Sweeney offsprings has entered that business as an advisor, so I told him he's in a good spot. Just put his head down and work hard.
That's right.
Talk about M&A here of the advisory business. Is that a way for a firm to grow? Is that reasonable these days? Because I see a lot of independent RIAs out there, and we speak to them here, and a lot of them sponsor Bloomberg Surveillance and Bloomberg Radio. Talk about M&A.
Yeah, M&A right now is as active as it's ever been. I think it's actually underreported in the media, and we've done 3 transactions this year, none of which are reported on. And we think about a transaction that involves an advisor taking over another advisor's practice. Let's say they're 2 independent firms. There was no banker on that deal, so no one knows about it. So I think the actual number of M&A transactions is significantly higher than what's reported. But you go back to what is the cause? It's succession. It's the lack of succession. It's the lack of liquidity.
How about just the movement that we've seen, I think, since the beginning of time, I don't know if it's more or less now, leaving a wirehouse, a Merrill, a Smith Barney, a more, those types of things, and going to an independent shop. What are the dynamics in that decision, and are we seeing more or less of that?
We're seeing a lot more of that. And if you look at the Cerulli data from 20 years ago, the wirehouse firms had over 50% of all the market share. It's now 37%.
Really?
So think about that percentage. It's 25% decline. It's never going to go to zero, but it could certainly go to 25%. I think what happens there is not unlike our country, where the first people coming over to America sent back messages and said, hey, it's great over here. You should come over here and join us.
Mm-hmm.
So now you see, which is an interesting trend, there's more advisors that manage $500 million outside of those firms than inside of those firms for the first time about 7 years ago.
I had a conversation, and everyone in New England will know this, at the Giant Tea Kettle by Government in Boston.
Nice.
I'm sitting there, somebody knew me. And he was a major producer for a major firm. And he, in 10 minutes about talking about this, was in tears because the only one he could carry his book to, his assets, his people, was his daughter. And he said, my daughter doesn't care. She's not invested in the business, the CAF-ness of it, the knowledge component of it. Jim, this is an incredibly important conversation. How do we fix it? Don't tell me legislation's going to fix this.
Right.
How do we fix this?
I think it's the biggest challenge of wealth management. It's a public persona. Unfortunately, you think Wall Street, and you think of Boiler Room, you think of Wolf of Wall Street, you think of Wall Street, right? The millions of people that come to work every day and do a great job for their clients, that doesn't make a great movie. So I think the problem is you have to show people that this is a terrific career,
right.
And the best advisors' clients deeply respect them. They are a key part of that family. Family foundation is a good advisor.
Are we over-diversified now? Have we taken marketing, the R squared of the given portfolio? Is it just matching what's common? Have we over-diversified? It's like Eric Balchunas, Paul. It's like have we over-diversified our way into ETFs and the rest?
Right. Listen, I think advisors have to decide, am I a salesperson or am I an economist, right? And many of the advisors say, hey, I'm a relationship person. I want to give the wealth management over to someone else, the actual asset management. I'm going to be more of the coach, watching the players, make sure they're all performing their jobs. I don't want to be the person making the decision, and maybe I'm not qualified.
Who's making the decision then? We're all fat and happy here in a bull market. When we go down 28%,
right.
Who's making the decision?
Right. It depends. Most of our advisors, Steward, actually run the money with discretion for their clients. They're taking that responsibility.
How many advisors do you have, and how many would you like to have? What scale in your mind?
So we have about 240 advisors today. We're a 10-year-old firm with about $37 billion in assets today. Our goal is to triple the firm in the next 5 years. But we try to bring in highly accredited advisors. So 70% of our folks are CFP designated. These are larger producers. Most independent firms, average advisors, $500,000 producer. Ours is $1.1 million. So they tend to be tenured, accredited advisors. We also have most of our advisors are on teams, so they've dealt with this succession issue they have G1, 2, 3.
What did you guys do in the bond debacle? I mean, it drives me nuts how the bond business moves on like the last 3 years didn't happen.
Right.
You had people that had 3 consecutive monthly or 2 consecutive quarterly statements where they're looking at their bond allocation going, what happened?
Right.
What do you do with that?
Listen, I don't give direct advice myself. Our advisors take care of that. But listen, I think our advisors have third-generation clients, so they've all lived through bond meltdowns, market meltdowns, the NASDAQ, you name it, the crisis in the early 2000s. So I think they've learned enough to stay with what you bought as long as it's high quality.
What's the biggest trend in your business these days? Is it technology? Is it just what's changing in your business these days?
I think it's how the clients and the advisors interact, right? And that's changed so dramatically since COVID. I mean, you think about the concept, if you said to a client 5 or 6 years ago, I want to talk to you over video, they'd be like, that seems very strange to me.
Right.
Where now they not only want that, they want apps and messaging and what have you. So the days of, I call the office, my advisor's not available, call me tomorrow. That's like, no, I'll just send him a message. I want to talk to him now. So I think there's a real need for technology to catch up with that.
One final question. What's the relationship here of your shop, your high net worth people, to the visible non-traditional firms like Fidelity, Schwab, and the rest?
I think it all becomes, it's the advice spectrum, right? Clients choose what type of advice do I want. You have folks that are do-it-yourselfers, and there's nothing wrong with that. You've always had that dynamic. Our folks tend to be people who are higher net worth, they have more complex financial situations, and they're looking for real advice.
Okay. Jim Gold, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. We're steward partners on a world changing. There's no question that we've seen that. And we thank all of you listening who are RIAs across this nation. Red and green on the screen, down a little bit red. I got fractional moves up, maybe the market waiting for Google this afternoon. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa. Vice President Kamala Harris has raised more than $100 million since Sunday and has secured the support of enough Democratic delegates to become her party's nominee against Donald Trump. Harris sealed her status as the presumptive nominee last night after crossing the magic number of 1,976 pledged delegates. More on the Harris campaign with Bloomberg's Ed Baxter.
Kamala Harris, in a meeting with campaign workers, came out swinging against Donald Trump.
Predators who abused women. Fraudsters who ripped off consumers. Cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
She says in her former jobs as a prosecutor and attorney general, she took on perpetrators of all kinds. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Today, Harris will travel to the battleground state of Wisconsin for a rally in Milwaukee. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's running mate slammed the Biden White House. J.D. Vance speaking in his hometown of Middletown, Ohio.
Democrats say that it is racist to believe, well, they say it's racist to do anything. I had a Diet Mountain Dew yesterday and one today. I'm sure they're going to call that racist too.
J.D. Vance called the Democrats a threat to democracy. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said conditions for a ceasefire and hostage deal with Hamas are becoming ripe, suggesting the two sides are getting closer to agreeing to at least a temporary halt to their war in Gaza. Netanyahu, who is in Washington, will give a speech tomorrow before a joint session of Congress. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Lisa Mateo, help me out with UPS right now. It's down. Paul, I just did a fitted standard deviation study.
Wow.
UPS is down 3.8 standard deviations on the market opening.
Okay.
It's just like, boom.
That's not a good
down.
thing. I mean, it's down 12.4% today, 52-week low, down 30% over the past year, so dramatically underperforming this market here. And again, we've seen it time and time again, that just relative to FedEx, just not able to kind of get its act together. It seems like when we hear from the analysts, it's just an operational thing there.
Well, they have those higher labor costs, the union
costs.
strike. They had that agreement that went through, and weaker demand. I mean, people during the pandemic, everyone was ordering, and now not as much anymore.
The whole shipping thing and the logistics, I guess, is the fancy word for it. I don't get it. I'm seeing more DHL, like where I live. People are DH. It's
Really?
German.
DHL
Yeah, it's like
German?
international.
Yeah. Okay.
And I guess they do some domestic. I don't see FedEx like I used to. I don't know. What do you see FedEx?
Yeah, I mean, I see the trucks
All
all
I see
over
are
the
Prime
place.
trucks.
That's the point.
That's all
what
I
Prime
see.
trucks, Amazon
Everywhere.
trucks have taken over the road. I mean, they are the trucking industry.
everywhere,
it seems.
everywhere.
We'll have that within the earnings season. Amazon will be
Talk
here.
to Lee Klaskow.
Well, Klaskow's like the real deal. He's like, this is Bloomberg Intelligence, folks. Lee Klaskow's like legend. Amazon, I mean, it's August 1st is when we see it.
Oh, is that okay?
It's a busy time.
Yep,
Apple,
absolutely.
all that's in there as
Big
well.
name.
Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX was a 16 into panic. We're halfway back to the nirvana of a 12 VIX, 14.81 on the VIX right now. 10-year real yield 1.95%. Market heals. Market is quiescent over the last 2 days. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. The stock rally, well, we have some mixed reviews right now. The NASDAQ up 0.2%, 44 points at 18,049. We have the Dow down 27 points, 40,389. The S&P 500 up 0.1%, 8 points at 5,572. We have the 2-year yield at 4.50%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.23%, and that's down 2 basis points. To earnings we go. UPS, we were just talking about it. It opened the biggest one-day drop since October 2008. Now it is down 11%. The company missed profit estimates due to high labor costs, uneven demand. And General Motors down 5%. Profit beat expectations thanks to strong demand for gas-powered trucks, but the company even saying it's pushing back the planned opening of an electric pickup truck plant in Detroit. It's also delaying a Buick plug-in. And shares of Kimberly-Clark down 3%. Sales disappointed. Demand for Kleenex tissues, Cottonelle toilet paper weakened. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Got a wonderful guest coming up here, really attuned to your ugliness and streaming. If you can't find the Olympics, if you can't find this, if you can't find that, Mark Douglas is going to straighten that out. But first, we have surveillance. I'm sleeping for the third night in Hartsfield correspondent. Joining us, finally returning, Michael McKee. You did a public service out on Twitter in your 5-day sojourn from Jackson Hole through Atlanta or that. Just quickly here, you were so gracious to Delta Airlines. You said the people there did the best they could do. We're still dealing with this. Why?
Well, I mean, at some point, Delta's got to take some responsibility for not being able to fix it. And their systems obviously were affected more than anybody else. And you have to wonder, how can you let the nerve center of your business be so vulnerable? But the frontline people, especially on Friday, nobody knew what was happening. Hundreds and hundreds of people in the airline terminals, all wondering when they were going to get to go and how they were going to get to go. And the gate agents and people like that had no idea. And I was just very impressed with how polite and professional they all were and how they treated everybody like an individual and understood that these people are really upset. Even though they can't do anything, they were the front-facing spear catchers.
It took you 5 days to get home?
Not 5. It took 3. I was supposed to leave on Friday morning, and I got home on Sunday night.
See, it goes my thing. It's just why get in an airplane these days? But talk to us. I mean, now we are in day 5 or 6. I mean, what do we know from the company? I mean,
well, the big issue, and I'm not an airline expert, but the big issue seems to be that the computer system that tracks their crews was badly affected. And I talked to flight attendants, a lot of time talked to people over the weekend, who said that Delta totally lost track of them. They did not know where they were,
pilots were.
And so they didn't know where the planes were or the crews. So they couldn't get them in the right place.
Take the next 10 minutes to rest, and then a lot of economic data the rest of this week. Running all of our economic correspondent, Michael McKee, 3-4 days on the road, given this terrible travel. Paul, bring in our next guest, because I don't know how to find Peacock for the Olympics.
Exactly.
And it's Mark Douglas's fault.
Maybe Mark Douglas will know. Mark Douglas is CEO of Mountain, doing a lot of work with big advertisers, big technology platforms, because let's face it, folks, over the last decade, that's where a lot of the content has gone, and that's where a lot of the advertising dollars have gone as well. Mark, thanks so much for joining us in studio.
Thank you.
Netflix, they started getting into the advertising business a year plus ago. How are they doing?
Well, I think I've been a big Netflix fan.
Yep.
Not just the shows, like the actual company, and I continue to be a fan. But I think in the advertising business, they are going on a journey. Like they initially launched with upfronts, and that's like, okay, you're in the 90s now, and then they announced they're going to go programmatic and kind of digital, and now you're kind of 2012. I think they're still kind of finding their way towards 2025 a bit, and so they just just haven't yet gotten on the cutting edge of what's happening in streaming from an advertising perspective, really democratizing and opening it up to all advertisers. They're being very controlled, and they're suffering, the ad business suffering as a result of that. But I do think they'll find their way.
Who's doing the best job in this new advertising world here, where it isn't the upfronts, it isn't just the big three networks?
Yeah, actually, NBC, Peacock, as you were mentioning, I think is doing a very good job, and they're showing how to really market sports in 2024 with all of the advertising around the Olympics and marketing the Olympics itself. Amazon continues to be the tech company among 200 media companies, and that's what has to happen going back to Netflix. Netflix literally launched a company in Silicon Valley, and I think now the company is to a certain extent very based in Hollywood, and I think for their ad business to grow, they have to go back to Silicon Valley and turn it back into a tech company and really democratize what their advertising business.
Lucas Shaw is a must-read for Bloomberg on screen time and all of the Mark Douglas world. When's the roll-up occur? The numbers Lucas Shaw is talking about are unsustainable.
Yeah.
No ifs or buts about it. Mark, I'm waiting for Paul Sweeney. We're waiting for the big roll-up. When?
Well, it's underway now. I think Paramount is an example of it. So the way to think of the roll-up in media is pretty straightforward. We could play a game. I name a brand. You tell me why you would, a media brand. You tell me why you would watch it. So I say Disney. You say children's entertainment. Right. ESPN. You say sports. I say ABC, and you give me a blank stare. Yep. And if you get the blank stare, that company is going to get acquired. The brand's going to disappear, and the content library is going to be what remains. And so you're going to wind up with a bunch of big media companies where people know why they're going to go there, and everyone else is just going to, the content libraries are going to be what's left.
All right, are people going to go, another part of media, are people going to go to theaters anymore to see movies? There's a new Deadpool movie out, which we have a lot of fans around here of the Deadpool franchise. What can you tell us?
Well, I actually went to the Deadpool premiere last night. That's why a big part of why I'm in New York.
Who did you go to the premiere with?
I was invited by Ryan Reynolds, who works his partner at Mountain, and so he threw me the invite. I have to say, and this I truly mean this, it couldn't have been any more entertaining watching that movie. They did a fantastic job. Everyone who sees it is going to love it.
So do you think there's a future for the theater-going experience here?
I think when you do as good a job as I witnessed, I mean, the movie got a standing ovation at the end of the premiere. It was just entirely funny. The script was entirely new. I mean, when it's that entertaining, people really know they're gonna, like, I have my popcorn. Right. They're giving out free popcorn, so I'm like, give me one of those. And you have your popcorn and a thoroughly entertaining experience. I think people will show up.
You know, Logan Howlett was great. I mean, I love the character. Hugh Jackman just killed it. There's no other way to put it. Great. But to Paul's question, I'm lazy. I'm going to stream it. Is that the future of $100 gajillion into Deadpool?
Yeah, well, every form of entertainment has its place, and you have to. I like to say you have to meet the consumer where they are, right? Or even in the ad business, you have to meet the advertiser that Netflix. What we were talking about with Netflix. If you meet the consumer where they are, in some cases that will be in the theater. In some cases that'll be on their couch at home.
Don't be a stranger. Just one question. You got 20 seconds. Is the Olympics going to work? Michael Nathanson's negative.
I think people are really excited about the Olympics, and I think NBC is going to do a fantastic job both on getting it out there and also on the ads. From what I'm seeing,
they're going to recoup their $1.2 billion. Everybody's going to be
happy. I had a meeting with the head of sales at Peacock the other day. He looked entirely relaxed.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
That's a lot of inventory.
Mark Douglas, thank you so much. So you do recommend Deadpool Wolverine?
Absolutely.
That's the takeaway for today.
What a show. I mean, to go from David Gura and Zach Cohen to Mark Douglas on all of this Hollywood stuff is extraordinary. Mark, thank you so much. Red and green on the screen right now. Just a churn to the market. Big afternoon. Carol Master leading our coverage. It's going to be interesting to say the least. And now, the theme song for Bloomberg Surveillance as we dive into the Paris Olympics. We got to play this. I mean, you know.
Iconic.
It's iconic.
The beach.
It's just like, I remember in a movie theater, where did the music come from? Good morning. Good morning, Paris.